which is located on the west side of Oak Street between 31st on the north and Linwood on the south. And docket item 7.2 is the companion rezoning for the same location. In both cases, the applicant is requesting continuance to November 1st in order to do public engagement, and staff recommends without fee. Next one is docket item 8, which is case number CPC 2022-00162. This is the Viva Benet residential community located at the southwest corner of Northwest Berry Road and Platte Purchase Drive. The applicant in this case is requesting continuance, and staff recommends without fee to November 15th. Next continuance is docket item 10, case number CPC 2022-00154. This is a request to rezone property at the intersection of West 41st Street and Bell. The applicant is requesting continuance of this case to November 1st, and staff recommends without fee. And finally, docket item 11, case number CPC 2022-00151. This is the Walmart located at 8301 North Church Road, which is proposing a building expansion. They are requesting continuance without fee to November 1st. And staff and that one also supports without fee. And that concludes the continuances.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission regarding continuance of those docket items? Okay, so at this time, we'll go ahead and open it up for public testimony for anybody that would like to speak regarding docket items 5, 6, 7.1, 7.2, 8, 10, or 11, and the continuance of those cases. Please come forward or raise your hand using the Zoom feature.
Mr. Chair, it appears there's no one in the chamber that wishes to speak, and no one has raised their hand on Zoom.
Okay, so go ahead and close public testimony then, and I'll take a motion, please.
Chair Crow, I want to make the motion, but I just want to make sure 10 says dismissal, or should we do that separately, or
I've got
we can do it together?
continuous to,
Oh, I have dismissal on mine. Sorry, maybe I don't have the most updated. Chair Crow, I move that docket item 5, 6, 7.1, 7.2, 8, 10, and 11 be continued as stated on the docket.
Second.
so I've got a motion and a second for continuance of docket items 5, 6, 7, 1, 7, 2, 8, 10, and 11 to the date stated on the docket. Lisa, can you take roll call on the motion, please?
Commissioner Allender,
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Beasley,
Aye.
Crow,
Aye.
Enders,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
and Sadowski. Aye.
Okay, it looks like the motion passes to continue those docket items. All right.
And
with
we
that-
are on YouTube,
Sorry?
and we are on YouTube now.
Thank you, Lisa. We're streaming now.
All right, thank you. Great. So with that, let's go back to docket item number 1, and noting we have a quorum on that, which I think Baker and Hill are recused from this.
And Chair Corral, is now a good time to go ahead and recuse?
Okay, you're recusing as well?
Yeah, and so if you don't mind me briefly stating my reason for recusal.
Sure.
With all due respect for City Attorney Sarah Baxter, understanding that she needs to protect the process and then also the commissioners. So I'm going to read this statement that I wrote. I've been advised to recuse by City Attorney Sarah Baxter. Last month, I said the following, quote, I've been trying to talk to the sponsors about this. I received a text message from Councilman Bunch. He is pulling his support from this. I believe Councilwoman Boo will as well. Those two sentences were interpreted to mean that I've had ex parte conversations about this ordinance with the sponsors. I'll repeat it. I have been trying to talk to the sponsors about this. I received a text message from Councilman Bunch. He is pulling his support from this. I believe Councilwoman Boo will as well. I'll note that I did not have Councilman Bunch's number when I received his text, and therefore I had to confirm that the text was in fact from him. The message read, "Hi, Tyler, Eric Bunch here. Sorry I didn't call you yesterday. I know Andrea mentioned that you wanted me to call. For what it's worth, I did not consent to sponsoring the Plaza Bowl ordinance. Not sure what happened there, but I'm pulling my name off the ordinance." End quote. Now it appears both council members Boo and Bunch are in fact on the ordinance, and so it appears that there have been more conversations. I, of course, have not met with either of them in the past month, and now as I've been advised to recuse, I regret that do not have the opportunity to weigh in as a commissioner. As I noted last month, I put a lot of time and energy into understanding what's at play here. I take this role very seriously. I spend hours each week reviewing the cases in front of us, doing my best to gain the understanding of these projects, the necessary understanding of these projects before they're presented to us by staff. In this instance, I researched even further. It's disappointing to me that my familiarity with the plaza, my concern for the plaza area, and the act of confirming council member sponsorship, which at the time was proven to be inaccurate and for which I will not assume intent of such a mistake, but that has created an air of impropriety. After a phone call with City Attorney Sarah Baxter following last month's commission hearing, I emailed her on September 29th asking, how do we discuss things like the comprehensive plan when each of us, meaning commissioners, have likely talked about the plan outside of a CPC meeting? To me, overlays seem to lie somewhere on the spectrum between a comp plan and a typical development case. I completely understand avoiding any conflicts of interest, but I want to make sure I understand why commissioners wouldn't be able to weigh in on a midtown overlay or a plaza overlay, et cetera, end quote. Again, neither Councilman Bunch nor Councilwoman Boo did anything improper when I asked them, not the other way around, why their names were on that ordinance. I have spoken to Councilwoman Boo previously about development on the plaza long before this ordinance existed. Councilwoman Boo did not give me a meaningful answer as to why she was on the ordinance, likely to avoid such impropriety and ex parte conversations, but did say she would pass along my question to Councilman Bunch. I followed up with City Attorney Sarah Baxter on October 8th after I had not heard back an answer for over a week. Then on October 14th, 15 days after my initial question about my concern about how no city planning commissioner would be eligible to vote on the comprehensive plan due to ex parte conversations, she replied with a response that did not answer the question. I'd planned to speak during my 2 minutes of public testimony, but was instructed just yesterday that I should not testify during public testimony, despite commissioners having done so in the past. So I am recusing, but I want to note that I feel adamant that the accusation of ex parte conversations by the applicant and their team does not constitute ex parte conversations. Further, although I did not have the opportunity to substantially nor materially communicate with any applicants about this ordinance, I do strongly believe that ex parte conversations around the comprehensive plan and area plans should be viewed differently than a typical development case. I'm frustrated that despite beginning this conversation a few days after last month's hearing, I'm being told in the 11th hour that I'm to be silent on an issue for which I know and care much about. And so, Mr. Chair and fellow commissioners, with that said, I recuse myself from this case and will not testify during public testimony.
Thank you. All right, so with that, let's go ahead, Joe.
All right, just give me a moment to share my screen. All right, good morning. As you guys remember at your September 20th meeting, you heard this request for the Plaza Bowl overlay amendment. This was initiated by ordinance 220729 back in August, and the city council committee that will hear this ordinance referred it or held it until tomorrow to allow time for the commission to consider it. So what I want to share, I'm sure everyone recalls there was a considerable confusion last time. There was several references to phases, and I want to share what I've learned in the meantime regarding that. So the phase terminology comes from the Midtown Plaza Area Plan Implementation Committee. One of their main goals, they had more than one, but one of their main goals was codifying some of the policies related to uses and height that had been in the Midtown Plaza Area Plan, as well as the previous plan as it relates to the plaza and the Plaza Bowl concept. So initially, I think the intention was to try to do that with one overlay for the whole Plaza Bowl concept. However, because of various property owners that were involved, a phased approach was chosen. And so that's where the phasing terminology comes into play. Phase one, and this map is helpful in explaining that and understanding that. Phase one is identified as the red shaded area. This is all land area that was owned at the time by Highwoods, who was preparing to sell the property, and they agreed to the codification, but they did not want it to be an overlay district. They wanted it to be a text amendment. So that phase was codified through the text amendment process in 2016. It is still in effect today. It is not being changed with the proposed ordinance before you today. Phase 2 is the purple shaded area in the upper right corner of the map. That is the southern edge of the Main Street corridor overlay district. Main Street was one of the other major initiatives in the Midtown Plaza area plan. As that was being developed and adopted, it was decided that the Plaza Bowl concept issues related to height and use would be included in that portion of the Midtown Plaza, or I'm sorry, Main Street overlay district. So that is phase 2. And again, that is not being touched with the proposed ordinance before you today. Phase 3 is just the green shaded properties that you see on this map. They're discontinuous. They're scattered in terms of their arrangement. But they are essentially the properties that form the north rim of the bowl concept that were not owned by Highwoods. And those were adopted as an overlay district. And when we refer to the Plaza Bowl overlay district, it is these properties that we're talking about. So the amendment before you today is to amend the height restrictions and how you get a deviation from those restrictions for those properties only, the green properties on this map. So below is a table that kind of summarizes what was in the staff report as it relates to 3 categories that we're addressing with this proposed overlay amendment. What this overlay does, or the overlay amendment would do, is it would provide criteria for the council to use when considering a deviation to building height on the green shaded properties. It would also limit as we all discussed at the last meeting, limit the maximum amount of deviation that can be granted to 6 feet. And so that's different than what is in our zoning code for anywhere else in the city. It is different from what's in the Main Street overlay, which is phase 2, the purple area to the northeast. And this table here lays out the differences between when you're looking at the Plaza Bowl concept, how can you exceed the building height set by both the overlays, the green shaded overlay Plaza Bowl, the purple shaded overlay Main Street, or in the case of the red shaded area, we default to the code only. So phase 1, again, is the red shaded area. If you want relief from the maximum height limit set by the code, you can pursue a deviation through the development plan process from the city council. If you choose to do that, there's no criteria provided, and the council may grant as tall of a building as they would like to see. There is no limitation on the building height deviation. You can also pursue a variance option, as you can for almost everything in the code, to the Board of Zoning adjustment. If you're someone who's choosing to go that route, there are criteria for all variances that the board has to consider, but there is not a limitation. The board could grant whatever building height they see fit. Phase 2, again, is the purple area, Main Street overlay. That overlay we would look to the overlay to see what it says about relief from building height, and it doesn't say anything. So the proper process would be to go to Board of Zoning adjustment. And just like I described before, it would be a variance from the Board of Zoning adjustment. There are criteria that the board has to consider, and there is no limitation on building height. And then finally, phase 3, what we're referring to today, the first option would be the deviation from council via development plan, which is exactly what we're talking about with this amendment. That currently is an option available to people. However, there is no relief criteria, and staff believes it is best practice to always provide criteria for decision making. So that is why we're supportive of the amendment. And so with option 1, you see in the 3rd column, 3rd row, what they're proposing to do with this ordinance is add that criteria for council to consider. And then they're adding the restriction of no more than 6 feet increase with the proposed amendment. And then finally, there is always an option even here for a variance as well, which, as we've discussed previously, does set forth relief criteria or criteria to consider for review. And then I wanted to share the red line version of the text. There is more being edited, but this is the policy change. The rest of it has to do mostly with some funding mechanisms that were necessary the first time the ordinance was passed, and those are being removed since they're no longer necessary. But this is the main policy change that I wanted to provide to you, and I'll just go ahead and read it. It says, in acting on a request for a deviation, the council must consider the following factors: whether the proposed additional height is based upon reasonably necessary and demonstrated need or hardship due to life safety, engineering, construction, or restoration reasons, and otherwise not attributable to conditions created by the applicant, and whether the proposed additional height will adversely affect neighboring or nearby properties. In no event shall the council grant a deviation in excess of the lesser of 10% of the height limitations set forth in this ordinance, or 6 feet, or which shall add any occupiable floor space. As I mentioned, staff is supportive of the amendment, mainly due to the provision of decision-making criteria. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission?
I just want building.
The building you said next to the Jack Henry building, the proposed building that you guys have seen, the Cosina. I don't know, but I do know the developer's here and you could ask him. I don't know the number. I can get you the number, but I don't know it right now off the top of my head.
I had a couple clarifying questions. So the dashed yellow line, some of those sites are not included in it, including that north site. Can you clarify what that line represents?
I believe that was based upon the identified study area from the Midtown Plaza area plan. But we can ask some of the proponents for some details. There are people here that were very involved in that and would be best positioned to answer that question.
And then I just wanted to have you comment on, in the staff report, you mentioned that you were supportive, but you'd like to see this criteria apply to all 3 ordinances.
Yeah, I think it's really confusing. It's a confusion thing for staff and customers and property owners when you have different rules for the same policy, essentially. I mean, we have the same policy and the bold concept and captured in 3 different codes, essentially 2 overlays and 1 zoning code. And each of them have different rules for how you get relief and whether the council should grant that and to what extent. We think I don't think that was deliberate. I think that was accidental because of the 3 different ways it was adopted. So I think it's important to come back at some point soon and streamline the rules in all 3 documents, or put all of this area into 1 overlay. Whichever path is chosen, I think it should be consistent, because there's, from a policy perspective, the red shaded area is the area where you really don't want the buildings to be any taller. So I think it shouldn't be easier to get a deviation there, but right now it is. You could argue that it is.
So do you feel, because I didn't see the relief criteria for phase 1, do you feel like what has been proposed here for this amendment is a better version of criteria than what, maybe I'm misunderstanding. I just want to make sure that whatever we're adopting here is evolving the criteria in a way like versus back to the language.
Yeah, so the phase 1 defaults, since it's in the code, it defaults to the deviation language in the code, which we have always had concern with because it allows deviations without any review decision-making criteria or any limitations at all.
Okay.
And it's used frequently, but there's no criteria for staff to consider. We would like to make a recommendation to you all and ultimately to the council as to what deviations should be granted, but there's no criteria to consider. So that's always something that we've thought needs to be amended. Whether the criteria proposed in today's ordinance are the exact same language that we would use, I don't know. We haven't had that internal analysis of it, but it would be similar probably, but it may be slightly different.
Joe, go ahead.
According to the clerks, I got that information from the clerk's site. So, and it was a month ago. So it may be that they are no longer sponsoring it. I don't know the process for how you remove yourself as a sponsor. So if they have, I haven't checked recently.
Can you show in the language of the ordinance where it states that this is only applicable to phase 3 of this map? When I'm reading it, it's applicable to everything within the bowl.
Yeah, and that was what was confusing to staff initially. But there's a legal description at the front of the ordinance. And I can show that to you.
Yeah, I've got those 53 over 50 properties that are shown here. A lot of them are, refer to condominiums. Is that correct?
Yes, there are some condominium properties within it.
Okay, but in the actual first paragraph of the actual ordinance, it said includes use and height regulations for the area generally located north side of 47th to the north side of 46 between Madison and J.C. Nichols. Okay.
Yeah, and we did have that legal description that's in the Plaza Bowl overlay ordinance. We mapped it again with our IT GIS staff, and they were able to confirm it matches the green shaded properties that were shown on that map.
Okay, so
So
these 41
it is
described lots or as part of the ordinance are those green.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I removed it, but yeah, it's the green shaded lots.
Okay.
We had them confirm that after our last meeting to make sure that it was describing the right properties.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, let's go ahead and open it up for public testimony then. If there's anybody from the public that would like to speak regarding docket item number 1, please come forward in the chambers or raise your hand online using the Zoom feature and you'll be called upon, beginning with those in the chambers first.
Does appear there are people that wish to speak in the chamber, and there's one person who's raised their hand online.
Hey, good morning. Come on up to the podium if you don't mind stating your name and address for the record.
Name's Thomas McIntyre. Address is 325 East 31st Street, Kansas City, Missouri 64108. Being a small business owner, I have had the opportunity to learn more about the city than I'd ever imagined or intended. Whether it is a process to win the airport concession bid, asking all our neighbors to sign a liquor license, or going through an audit, or learn new regulations about parks on the fly. One thing I want to depend upon is fairness. I believe that all Kansas Cityans should be able to rely on the fairness of our processes and fairness of our rules. Reading through the emails between the Block Real Estate Company, Historic Kansas City, and the Kansas City Planning Department about drafting the Plaza Bowl ordinance was truly disheartening. I pit in my stomach to see that one business owner was working with the city to directly influence the outcome of the neighbors, applying separate rules to different properties, even rationalizing how to create a quote second tier so there could be 2 sets of rules. Furthermore, that same business owner who was writing the anti-competitive language into ordinance was asked to notify those very neighbors who were being adversely affected. I know enough about business owners. I know enough to know that business owners aren't the ones that should be supposed to be sending notice on a text amendment, especially when there are massive conflicts of interest. I wasn't paying close attention at that time, but I would go back and through the articles at KCUR and the Business Journal and the City Scene KC, you learn that those adversely affected neighbors never received notice. Notice that was meant to be sent by their neighbor who was restricting the future of their property. I don't understand how there are dozens of emails between Historic KC, Block Real Estate Services, and Kansas City, Missouri Planning Department, but not one of the other affected property owners were brought into the process of drafting the bowl overlay until the city planning commission hearing. Regardless of what others tell you, the emails and articles point to a corrupt process. I expect more from the city. You all have the opportunity to continue this process so we don't dig ourselves into a deeper hole. I support the bowl concept in 1989, but I do not support the map that was drawn in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Others like to speak?
Morning, Matt Pennington, Drake Development, 16448 Cody Street, Overland Park, Kansas. Appreciate your time this morning. Obviously, there's been a lot of thought and contemplation gone into this. I think what we have to really evaluate today is just truth and facts. And so that's what I tried to do, is bring forward truth and facts. So I dug in, and here's the 1989 bowl overlay. Send that out to everyone after this. I just wanted everyone to see that it does exist. It is real. So those thoughts and the desires of those folks that put that on paper almost 30 some years ago did have an intent in mind on the bowl overlay. So today, I think I'm presenting today urging the city council and you all to not give up your discretionary rights to review projects based on merits and potential contributions to the Kansas City and the plaza. As an owner of Jack Henry, you see Chiefs fit. That project wouldn't exist with this ordinance. We came in and asked for an 8-foot variance. That project would have been terminated, and therefore we would have not had Chiefs fit. Those are the decisions we're making today. The bowl concept is not a bad one. That's the truth. Bowl concept has been a discussion since 1989. I just showed you the package. The bowl concept, governed by citizens, uninfluenced, is not a bad one. The bowl concept, politicized and influenced by self-serving individuals that we just heard about, is a bad one. Here's one of the last recommended bowl overlays outlined by city planning in the Plaza Westport Neighborhood Association back in June 2004. I've brought the 1989 map and I brought the 2004 map to show an uninfluenced bowl overlay. I'd like to quickly hand out each of those to you if you don't mind. Thank you.
Time.
Can I get 30 seconds just in sending it out?
Up to the chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I get 30 seconds?
Yes.
I want you to look in that bowl overlay and several of the latest projects that have been finished, 46 Penn, 44 Washington, 47th and Madison. The bowl overlay was codified in 2019. You see every one of those amendments in 1989 to 04 included these boundaries uninfluenced. The Plaza Bowl Overlay Committee, the new committee, consists of Catherine Shields, Ken Block, Vicki Noties, Lisa Briscoe, Historic Kansas City. By way of example, the original bowl recommended 4 to 10 stories, which you see in there. The 46 Penn property was not included in the height restrictions of this new ordinance, is now 14 stories. 44 Washington was in the 1 to 3 story recommendation. This property is also not included in the height restrictions from the new ordinance. It resulted in a 4-story apartment. And 47 Madison was 9 to 12. In this original uninfluenced bowl, it ended up 16 stories. All three projects are examples how city council used its discretion to approve the projects, which I believe were beneficial to the plaza. So I just want you all to have that. Obviously I have, and I'll respect the time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Morning. My name is Adam Pfeiffer. I'm the owner of Kindred. It's a women's clothing boutique located at 601 West 48th Street on the Country Club Plaza. We work with over a dozen women-owned local small businesses, and we provide them the chance to have a retail storefront on the plaza through a collaborative model. On February 22nd of this year, we were notified that we needed to vacate our store, quote, within a week, due to a new higher paying national tenant coming into the space. Over the previous 12 months, we'd paid over $72,000 in rent to the plaza. Why is that important? Because that space is still empty today. The prospective national tenant fell through. We were moved because there's only so many good vacancies on the plaza. And if you look at a map of the plaza right now, you'll notice a few things about vacancies. I actually have a map here. There's about 24 vacancies on the plaza, as noted by the highlighted portions of this map. Many of these locations have been vacant for several years. There's many seasonal temp leases, pop-up tenants that don't show up on this map, and thus this understates the true level of vacancy. The same spaces continue to struggle attracting new tenants due to systemic issues. The old Houston space has plumbing issues and a parking garage that creates incredibly low clearance. The theater building can't accommodate another dumpster. Fred Piatz has deferred maintenance and architectural problems. The former Oliver and Colvine space locations lack nearby parking. It's a 100-year-old center, and I've been on the plaza since 2012 in one capacity or another. They've maintained the mosaics and the facades, but many interior parts of the plaza buildings have been neglected and other parts have been outgrown. To ensure that the plaza continues to be a gem of Kansas City for the next 100 years, we cannot further the suffocating restrictions on development. Any major development will have significant scrutiny and public input and will come through this body as well as the city council. Please don't make future development harder, as preservation has already rendered parts of the Plaza Bowl obsolete. I support the Plaza Bowl concept, but I do not support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the chamber like to speak?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Plan Commission. My name is Dan Coffran. That's spelled C-O-F-R-A-N. I live at 1000 West 70th Street in the 6th District in the Brookside area. I served on the city council for 8 years in the 1980s and the 1990s. I represented what was then the 4th District, which included the Country Club Plaza. And I worked extensively as a member of the council, along with Councilwoman Shields. We both served together then on the original Plaza Plan, which was passed in 1989. Thereafter, that was updated with the Midtown Plaza Area Plan in 2016, I believe. And we're now here on the measures to codify various recommendations for the Plaza Bowl overlay district. I've got some slides. I just want to answer some questions or address points that were raised today. And if you could use the PowerPoint there, this will answer some questions more rapidly than I could speak about them. Generally, there have been accusations made or assertions made that somehow the process for doing the Plaza Plan in 1989, the Midtown Plaza Plan in 16, and thereafter the overlay was done without full community participation, that it was somehow was done to benefit some plaza property owners and to the detriment of others. That simply is not the case. All of these efforts were broad-based citizen efforts, including neighborhood representatives, owners of properties on and around the plaza, institutions. I mean, it was extremely inclusive. Mr. DeBosch, I think, was very much involved in that process. If you wish to question him, I'm sure he can answer and let you know how inclusive all of that was. So it wasn't any sort of a gerrymandered or political measure. Regarding the next point, how do I advance? Take it down?
Yeah, somebody from staff help him out there with the slides.
That was time.
Okay, now it's on.
Okay. Yeah, this is a much longer presentation than we thought.
The red area, of course, is the original plaza ownership. The green are the additional properties that are being added now. The red was done all at once because there was one single owner, then the Highwoods Company. The greens were, however, owned by multiple owners. What we're doing now is coming back and getting the properties in the green. As you can see from this table at the top, there are a total of 12 parcels there, whereas phase one was 15 blocks all under one ownership. That's why we're doing it in this particular manner. In terms of timing, remarks were just made about certain projects built. Here's the timeline. The Plaza Steps office building was built in 1985 before there were any area plans on this particular area. We did the Plaza plan in 1989. And Valencia Place was done. That's where the insurance offices are in 1997. So it went through and it complied with the recommendations of the Plaza Urban Design and Development Plan. That was and is an area plan. Those are recommendations only, guidelines. They have to go through that process, and they did. Then we did the Midtown Area Plan in 2016. This is out of order. 46 Penn Center was done in 2014, before the Midtown Area Plan and before what we're talking about today. So yes, other projects may exceed what we're talking about today, but that was under a prior law. That was under an area plan. What we're doing today is simply seeking to codify what were recommendations. In fact, the city council asked us, or asked the city staff, if you will, to objectify, go from area plan recommendations to a codified situation over a year ago, and that's what's happening right now. So we're simply codifying what was a recommendation for a very long time. Nobody's being discriminated against. We're simply trying to protect the plaza. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Wait a second, when he gets that off there. Okay, go ahead.
Garrett Prather, 3120 Terrace Street, Kansas City, Missouri, 64111. I don't live on the plaza anymore, but I did for a number of years and in multiple locations. I think it's safe to say that nearly all Kansas Cityans like the concept of the Plaza Bowl. Personally, I love the concept of it. I can't imagine why someone wouldn't. I don't want to see high rises in the middle of the district, and I have a hard time imagining someone would want to see that. I also have a hard time imagining that actually coming to fruition. There are two logical fallacies that I think you should think about when considering this proposed ordinance: false dilemma and slippery slope. This ordinance isn't about whether the plaza turns into downtown or not. It won't. That's a false dilemma, insinuating that there are only two options: preserve the plaza exactly as it is or see it turn into something awful. Second, slippery slope. The idea if you just let one project pass, it ensures we're on a path where all projects will pass. Again, this is a logical fallacy because it sounds intriguing and intuitive, but it is not true. I came across an article from Kevin Collison published by KCUR on February 5th, 2019. He was summarizing why the City Planning Commission had unanimously rejected the building height limits, which City Council later approved, as you all know. His first sentence of the article said that the plan was rejected unanimously Tuesday by the City Planning Commission as arbitrary and political. The article says that Plan Commissioners members said they were uncomfortable with the boundaries used for Plaza Bowl height restrictions. Chair Babette Macy is quoted saying, "I think some of what's been picked is political with this jagged line. City council members may make deals with each other to pass ordinances, but this body does not. You have an obligation to call out corruption when you see it. You cannot build a good house on a poor foundation. To me, this ordinance reaffirms that rigged, corrupt process from 2019. I'll also add that in looking at that one paragraph, adversely affecting nearby properties, that's extremely vague. Like, who's deciding that now? Once that gets passed, you're passing that along to somebody else. We can all save the historic nature of the Plaza Bowl, but we can't do it like this. We're better than this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kent Brown, 127th and Carter, Overland Park, Kansas. I'm here representing the ownership of the Plaza Skelly Group LLC at 600 block of 47th Street, and the Plaza Office Building LLC, the Medical Plaza Building off J.C. Nichols Parkway and 46 Terrace. Both of those are in the Phase 3 Plaza Bowl height restrictions enacted in 2019. And I would like to request 4 minutes to speak since I represent two different ownership groups.
Okay.
Thank you. The ordinance before you for consideration is unfair to my clients as well as other property owners in the Phase 3 bowl restrictions or the green zone for a number of reasons. There was no notice given to my client about this pending ordinance. They would normally get notices from the city. Did the city send them out? How is that possible?
You want me to answer during testimony?
Sure.
No, I can. It was a text amendment. Yeah, it was a text amendment, city planning staff report. Well, we disagree with the staff analysis that this qualifies for a text amendment, as my property owners do not feel this is a minor amendment. My property owners had to find out about this from a concerned citizen less than a week ago. As a result, my client has not had time to talk to staff, planning commission, and council members about this ordinance, which directly affects their livelihood and their employees' livelihood. Unfortunately, it does not feel like this was just a mistake, as this ordinance is already on the docket for tomorrow morning's committee discussion and for fast tracking through the council. There are only a handful of property owners affected, so a notice would seem to be the democratic way of doing business. We humbly ask you to continue this ordinance today to give my client time to talk to planning commission and council members. My client's been on the plaza for decades, paying taxes, paying transit taxes. And I must ask each one of you, was this ordinance specifically restricting these buildings in green? This process has not been transparent, as other people have said, and appears to have been done to keep people out of conversations. I want to take a moment to show you a few photographs. This is my client's building right here on 47th Street. This building to the south, the old Plaza, the Plaza Theater building, is at least 20 feet higher than that building. The proposed ordinance would allow him to only go up 6 feet. He would still be 2 stories shorter than that building. The other building, the Plaza Medical Building, J.C. Nichols Parkway, has a 7-story hotel being built next to it. Again, my client would not be able to do anything like that with the pending ordinance. It just makes no sense to penalize and restrict current owners in such a way when there may be great uses in the future to benefit the entire city. What if the nicest steakhouse in the country wants to come on top of the Skelly building? He wouldn't be able to do it. He couldn't even build past the AC units that are up there because they're over 6 feet tall. Why would you further restrict trade on the plaza in this economy when it would be good for the area and the community? Trying to advance this ordinance does not make sense. Can't imagine this would happen in other growing metropolitan cities who want new development and progress. And finally, do you not trust your future council and planning commission members to make decisions as Kansas City grows and changes? What are you telling them with this ordinance? That you don't trust the future city councils that are voted on by the taxpayers and voters of Kansas City, so you don't trust their citizens? Please continue this ordinance so that the affected primary stakeholders have a chance for a say in this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Chad Hickman. My business Sandlot Goods has a shop at 306 West 47th Street. We manufacture baseball hats and other textile goods here in Kansas City with a growing staff of 50 plus. We're very proud to be based here in Kansas City, and our plaza store is our best performing location and is an important part of our business. Everyone's familiar with the often referenced idea, those who forget their history are condemned to repeat it. Learning about the 2019 Plaza Bowl ordinance and the process behind it has been frustrating and disappointing. Miranda Davis, writing for the Kansas City Business Journal, wrote on February 5th, 2019, that after 2 hours of public testimony and letters of support from neighborhood associations, historic Kansas City, and some developers, an ordinance that would create zoning regulations limiting the height of some buildings within the core of the Country Club Plaza unanimously failed before the city's plan commission on Tuesday. Councilwoman Catherine Shields was the applicant. Chairman Babette Macy said the overlay made the development process unnecessarily complicated for developers, and she blasted the applicants for spreading misinformation about what the development process currently looks like on the plaza. There's misinformation out there, she said, referencing letters she got from the members of local neighborhood associations. So yes, this concept did originate in 1989, and I support that concept, but the 2019 version was created out of misinformation, special interests, and corrupt processes. In 2019, it failed the CPC unanimously, but City Council passed it based upon backroom deals. I ask you all to continue this case, be the moral arbiter that stands up against corruption. A recommendation for denial will allow the same process to unfold as it did in 2019, allowing City Council to pick and choose winners based upon political donations and not what's fair for the city. This case has already been docketed for committee for tomorrow. I support the 1989 concept of the Plaza Bowl, but I do not support this ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Keith Bradley, reside at 605 East 69th Terrace. I'm one of the owners of Made in KC, a local retailer around town that supports over 200 artists and makers. We have over 17 metro locations, including 11 in Kansas City, Missouri alone. And as you may have guessed, our best performing location is on the Country Club Plaza. It's become a great platform for artists and makers. We spend the majority of our time doing things for small businesses so they can in turn focus on the core of their business, harvesting honey, making candles, brewing beer, cultivating creativity. When it comes to city plan, I feel the same concept holds. There's a degree of trust that you all, the commissioners, staff, are doing your best to create a level playing field that allows our city to grow in a sustainable, equitable, and unique way. We also office over on Martini Corner, and I know that you all recently voted in support of the historic designation of Doug Price's building at the corner of 31st and Main. I disagree with that decision, but I respect it. I respect that Doug had the opportunity to make his case. He was noticed, the neighbors were noticed. He was able to engage with the community, council members and staff before y'all made your final decision. I ask that you do the same here. Clearly, this process has been bungled. Sometimes that happens, but you all have the opportunity to set it and make it right. I support the Plaza Bowl concept. I think most people clearly do, but I don't support the map that shows it was clearly influenced disproportionately by one property owner. That's not how we should do things in Kansas City. Please continue this case off docket so we can do this the right way. It may take longer, but it'll bring the process and more people together, bring more people to the conversation and create a solution that is more equitable, sustainable, and puts Kansas City and the Plaza on the right track for the long run. Thanks for your service to our city.
Thank you. Very brief, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
As I finish, I'd just like to hand out this, if you don't mind. This was the exact testimony from Councilwoman Shields on February of 2019. She states all these situations that have been referred to, and I guess we're going to hear from Commerce in a bit. They're all situations where any one of these property owners will have a right to come forward with a plan that their neighbors and public and this council can review and seek to have whatever plan is that they want to move forward. That right will still be there to them. This is what she promised in that while I sat in the audience trying to put our proposal forward. So I just ask that promise is upheld and that we continue to move this in the right direction. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Councilwoman Catherine Shields. I live at 4561 Walnut, and I am the sponsor of this piece of legislation. First of all, I have talked with both of my co-sponsors. They are still co-sponsors. Mr. Bunch had a momentary hiccup because he hadn't read the final draft. So he, in response to the query from Mr. Ender, he wrote back, "Well, I'm taking my name off. I haven't read the final draft." Within 2 hours, he texted me again, said, "I've read the final draft. I'm fine with it. I'm having my name put back on." So this legislation comes before you with 3 sponsors. Actually, Councilwoman Boo is the original source of this ordinance. When we were passing the in 2019, the third bowl overlay in Area 3 that's before us today along 47th Street, it had been, the language in it and all had been exactly like in areas 1 and 2, which was there was no reference to varying from the plan, having a deviation. But however, one of the attorneys for one of the developers asked to put in language about how there could be a deviation. So because of that request from the development community, it was passed out that way, but Boo and her colleagues on the city plans and zoning committee asked, she says, well, let's pass this, but I think there should be criteria developed. And so over the past couple of years since 2019, there've been discussions with staff, and finally a bill setting out criteria, an ordinance setting out criteria was developed, reviewed and supported by staff, and now before you today. So that is the history of it. You know, I served on the Midtown Overlay Review Plan prior to coming back on the council in 2015. And it couldn't have been a broader, more inclusive effort. We had people from the development community. We had individuals from all of the institutions, Rockhurst, UMKC, St. Luke's. All of the neighborhoods were included. So, I mean, this isn't some plot hatched up by me or anyone else. This was a basic community effort that came forward with the Midtown Overlay, then with the Midtown Plan, then followed up with the overlay to make sure that we had codified into the code, not just as advisory, but as actual law within our code, that there were height restrictions on the plaza. When the development community asked for language saying there could be deviations, which you've learned from the staff could have happened anyway, those were put in place. That language was put in place, and we're now trying merely to respond to what our city plans and zoning committee asked for, which is criteria, which the staff has recognized that it's important to have criteria. So that is the effort that's before you today. If you have any questions, I would be happy to respond to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Patricia Jensen with the Ross Fretz Law Firm. Just a quick comment. We're not afraid of criteria. It needs to be unbiased criteria. And what's in front of you is biased criteria. It's one-sided criteria. Plus it puts a hard and fast limit of 6 feet in height deviation on any applicant. So we ask that you continue the case, echoing the comments that have been made, to allow us to work collectively with everybody on unbiased criteria. So it doesn't lead you to a particular answer ahead of any application being made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the person with their hand raised on Zoom has lowered their hand, so I don't believe we have any testimony on Zoom.
Don't have any, or we do?
Don't.
Okay, anybody else? All right, so this time we'll go ahead and close public testimony. There's been a lot of different items that have been presented through the testimony, as well as different a lot of clarifications in the actual original or discussion of the project itself. So any questions from the commission after hearing all of this?
And I appreciate the various perspectives, I think that's been the first that we've heard a little bit more of a well-rounded perspective on the history. So I appreciate that. I mean, I guess this is a really challenging decision, to be honest, but I feel like I appreciate that the staff sort of outlined what those relief criteria paths would be, how we would get there. I don't know. I think I heard a lot of absolutes around not being able to do things, but there are multiple options if there are the intent to build higher. And I guess one of the things I didn't hear today was by height is the solution to the plaza. I know in certain instances that can be the case, but when you have vacancies on the first and second floors, I'm just not clear on the value of height in solving that issue. So that's just my comments right now.
For me, just kind of like you said, with an absolute, there is an absolute. And that is, I think a lot of this is it's providing criteria to have a deviation. And the absolute in that is there's no more than 6 feet. That's my height, a little less than my height. So I think that's very limiting. And just says in no case shall, deviation be given beyond 10% or 6 feet. I think that is an absolute that probably shouldn't be there. I think there's opportunity for other things. It could be, 10 feet. It could be 15 feet that still fits within the plaza. So I think it's very limiting on what that deviation can be. And the only way to change that once this goes through is you have to come back to the beginning and have somebody sponsor to change the language again within the text of the code. So I see that just being a very difficult process if there's a project that's a great fit for the plaza that that works and it's more than 6 feet. So in some ways, I'm kind of in favor. My vote right now, the way it's written is denial, but I'm more than happy to continue it, to have additional discussion, to talk through that paragraph of in no way should we exceed 6 feet.
Yeah.
I think we didn't write this, so I think you need to ask the sponsor or the proponents how they arrived at that.
I thought that was a staff record.
No, we didn't. This was not written by staff.
They can't hear. Bruce.
You gotta speak into your microphone.
Okay, sorry. I'm just sharing the microphone. I thought that was staff recommendation. So then I would be supportive of a continuance for further discussion here. I think that is a limitation that we need to think through. But I am supportive of the bowl concept. There's no doubt on that. And I want to be on record to say that I think it's one of the features of the plaza area. And I want to protect that, but I certainly want to give some flexibility on that 6 foot. So I would be supportive of a continuance just to work that through and understand. I don't think anybody's come and told us today why there is a 6 foot limitation. And thanks, Joe, for the clarification. I thought that was from staff. So that's my view today, would be a vote for continuance for some further discussion.
Same here.
Loud enough.
No, they can't hear you online. So
They
you have
can't
to.
hear me online?
No.
I'm in agreement of a continuance, and part of what I'm looking at is why start over if we're working to clarify and make everything. Let's just start now. And I do also agree, I thought part of that criteria was coming from staff. So that makes me even more hesitant to move forward because I want staff to actually look at the different guidelines we go by when it does come to development, not just council that is responding to inquiries they may have received from whomever. I don't want to categorize where they're getting it from, but to keep us on the right playing field as a city, I want staff to weigh in and take this opportunity to make this whole process more cohesive, aligning the different phases as we see them now so that it is one process, period. So I too would vote for continuance, for staff to weigh in and lead the charge on how this should be developed and raised, to go back to the process so the community knows that everyone has an opportunity to weigh in. So if we have to do it more like an area plan type presentation to get that input, I want us to take the time to do that. Everyone emphasizes the importance of the plaza. We know that it's worldwide recognition, so we need to take the time to do what we need to do to continue that history and tourist pool for the city. Let's do it right now and not continue it for another time to come back and try to redo it. So I'm a no at this point. I want to continue it to actually develop better and best practice at this time. Thank you.
I agree with that. I mean, I think the 6 feet, I just have questions about where height developed over the course between, I know there's been a lot of discussion about it and some plans given to us, but I feel like that's been kind of a rushed process in terms of understanding where those heights sat from 1989 till where they sit today. And so if we're enacting something as restrictive as 6 feet of deviation, I feel like it's a little bit rushed to make those decisions, particularly given the variety of building heights we have on the plaza today. Some of the testimony spoke to that, but I think we're just not in a good position to evaluate whether it's restrictive. I don't gotten that full picture. And maybe that's something that the staff could help with, is just helping us better understand that history between how things developed from where they were in 1989, how they developed in 2019, just so we can have a better understanding of that section through those streets and how projects came about. So I'm in favor of continuance as well.
Okay, sounds like it's kind of a unanimous decision to continue it, to have a little bit more work done on the actual. I think everybody supports the bowl concept. It's just a deviation amount and limitation on that. So I think that needs more. So what would, if we continue this, Joe, what would be a date that would be acceptable? Because it sounds like there needs to be some discussion that needs to take place, and it might take a little while to get that done.
Yeah, I think if we're just looking at the ordinance before us, the language and the criteria and some scenario-based examples of how that plays out on real projects, as well as the language and the deviation and how that might play out on real projects, then I think the time frame is more of a continuance to a date certain. But if the commission's saying go beyond that and include the deviation language and criteria related to that for all 3 phases, then that's going to take more time because there's other property owners involved, other people involved that have not, as if you've heard, have not been involved yet.
Is that something then to continue off docket?
I think that would be a continuance off docket because we wouldn't know the path. I wouldn't be able to tell you here what the path is to that.
Don't think about trying to combine these into one consistent.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea because then we've actually got a consistent criteria across the complete plaza. So I think we should, it's basically been piecemealed from what I can understand from the testimony today. So why not just, let's piece it together as per Florentine's or Commissioner Beasley's suggestion, let's do it right. And let's get a consistent view across the complete plaza would be my view.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Makes sense to me. So whoever makes the motion, please make the statement as to why we're continuing that and what we're looking for. And I think maybe Commissioner Beasley, you want to make the motion because you said everything so eloquently.
Can I remember it?
Not putting you on the spot or anything.
No, you're fine. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the motion that docket item CPC 2022-00153 be placed off docket for staff to work with parties involved to make the 3 phases one so that development can be improved for the Plaza Bowl concept.
And working on a methodology for the deviations.
And working on a methodology for the deviation.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so I've got a motion and a second for continued docket item number 1 off docket to allow time to work on that by staff and interested parties. Lisa, can you take a roll call on that motion, please?
Commissioner Allender.
Aye.
Beasley,
Aye.
Corral,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
and Sadowski.
Aye.
Okay, it looks like the motion passes to continue docket item 1 off docket. Just a note on that we have this quorum, involved in this. So when it comes back on docket, we need to make sure able to attend and be a part of this. So thank you, everybody, for your attendance and discussion on this actual item. Okay, move on now to docket item number 2, please.
All right, docket item 2 is case number CPC 2022-00125. Request to approve a development plan for a self-storage facility on about 2.5 acres at 3910 North Oak Traffic Way. Larissa Chambi is the staff planner.
In just 1 second while I get. All right, this is docket item number 2, CPC 2022-00125 for a non-residential development plan for a self-storage facility at 3910 North Oak Traffic Way. The site is located in the Briarcliff-Wynwood area plan. There's no registered neighborhood or homes association tied to the subject site. This is the area maps showing the zoning. The subject is currently zoned B4-2. As you can see, it's surrounded by R-1.5, R6, B3-2 across the street. The zoning on the property does not match the future land use designation for the area plan. However, the use is located in a commercial corridor, and there's a car dealership to the east, a restaurant to the north. The area plan recommends residential medium high density. In the area plan, it states neighborhood scale retail, restaurants, and mixed use buildings are the preferred use for this lot. However, since it's zoned B4-2, that allows for heavy commercial activities such as warehousing, motor vehicle repair, and self-storage. In 1991, there was an ordinance number 91-0275 that approved an upzoning for this site to allow for a car fuel to go in and for the proposed grocery store that was rezoned to a C-3A1-P zoning, and it never got changed. So when the city transitioned to the current zoning, it transitioned to the B4-2, which is the equivalent of the previous zoning. The applicant is proposing 2 phases for this project. He is going over 40,000 square feet, which is why he's applying for the development plan. This is the first phase, and then over here would be the future expansion. Proposing 578 self-storage rental units throughout the 2-story structure. And there's additional requirements for self-storage units located in section 88369 of the code. And those are found on page 2 of the staff report. This is the proposed layout for the lots. Each color is a different size for the units. And I went through the different sizes in the staff report so that you can get a better idea of those as well. Adequate utilities are provided. Safe and efficient movement of vehicular and pedestrian traffic were included, and extensive landscaping is being provided. The applicant is proposing the following construction materials. Due to its location close to the residential district, staff is proposing or recommending that the applicant update to the construction materials to better fit in with that area. And that is the end of my presentation, and I can answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from the commission?
I have one. The diagram you showed of the different unit sizes, is that just for phase 1's unit?
So that's the first floor of both phases. And then there's a second floor, which slightly matches the
Go back
same
to
thing.
that slide for me, please. That's the entire site, not just phase
Yep.
1. Phase 1 is the side where it looks like a upside down L, more to the right side of the screen.
Phase 1 is not the upside down L, so that's this is phase 2 over here. Sorry, can you see the mouse? Yeah, no?
It's turned 180 degrees from what it is on the site plan.
So the rectangular area up until, I don't know how to describe it, but there's one section, phase 1 is just rectangular and phase 2 has the L.
Out of the screen.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, let's go ahead and welcome the applicant, if the applicant's available.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Ty Zahner. I live at 7614 Washington in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm representing the applicant. I don't really have anything to add. That was a pretty good presentation. If there's any questions, I can take those.
Okay, any questions from the commission to the applicant?
I had a question about if the applicant, considering this was a use more for commercial retail, did you consider doing any sort of mixed use at that first floor?
No, it's 100% a self-storage facility is the intent.
Okay. So we're seeing more of that with storage, that just to activate at the street level so that it doesn't become sort of an inactive site. That's not something you've incorporated on other projects?
No, we have never done a mixed use with self-storage.
Okay.
Just going back to staff, did this project get looked at against the North Oak overlay? Is it? Okay.
And there was one additional public comment submitted after the publication of the staff report, and Mr. Clark will hand that out.
Yeah, frankly, I like the very last email that we received in our staff report. It's very short and sweet, to the point. Thank you. Okay, so if there's no more questions for the applicant, then let's go ahead and open it up for public testimony. If there's anybody out there from the public that would like to discuss docket item number 2, please come forward or raise your hand if you're online using the Zoom feature.
Mr. Chair, there's no one in attendance in the chamber that wishes to speak. There were 3 people with their hand raised. Dustin Burton, who I think is the applicant, Thomas Nolte, and Claudia Baker.
Okay, let's start with Mr. Nolte.
Good morning. I'm Thomas Nolte. I'm the architect and land planner for this project. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm at Nolte and Associate Architects and Land Planners. We're at 9400 Reeds Road, Overland Park, Kansas. And we developed this 53,000 square foot 2-phase project. There's about 50% in the first phase and 50% in the second phase. And as mentioned by Ty, that all activities, associated with the climate control are interior only. We have met with the planning staff and had several suggestions. We added additional windows, enhanced the landscaping, upgraded the building materials, and also provided some additional circulation associated with any kind of emergency or fire department by providing an extra curb cut on the north property line. The building's east side is approximately 93 feet from the pavement on North Oak. And we are providing a detention area on the east side of the building. That's why we have the additional setback. The site is formerly known as the John Cheesick Automotive Dealership, and therefore is currently paved, but it's fairly level. But directly to the south, we have a grade change of approximately 16 feet higher. And to the west, we have a grade change that is approximately 15 feet lower. The north is level and the east is relatively level. So we've provided some upgraded elevations of the east and north, which is probably the only 2 areas that will be seen by the public as they drive by. There's also a pretty good example of other facilities and 2 of them are located in Kansas City. One of them on North Brighton. There's some pretty good pictures. And this one is similar to that one with the masonry and also the roof detailing. We have reviewed the staff report and found that at least on the architectural side, items 1, 2, or 3 are agreeable, and the rest of them are civil and developer driven. And you can hear from them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
People keep raising their hands. If you're on Zoom and want to speak, please raise your hand now so we know what we have. Mr. Chair, one person I left off is Deb Herman, who was already admitted and I wasn't aware of it. So it appears to me that Deb Herman and Claudia Baker and now Laura Spywak are wishing to speak.
Can you please just one at a time? Because I won't remember. I'm sorry.
Deb Herman.
Names. Yeah. So Ms. Herman, please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Deb Herman. I'm at 5340 Northeast Shoto Traffic Way. I represent Northland Neighborhoods and Northland Neighborhoods Planning and Development Committee. The project you heard before this really illustrates too some similarities in that for the North Corridor, scores of neighbors and business owners have come together over the years, approving 2 different area plans, continuing to work through the years, seeing and having some success at getting some infrastructure improvements, seeing some positive business occupation. But the plans appear at some points to be ignored. The plans called for this to be medium density residential and transportation oriented development. And that's what we want. This spot is surrounded by, on 2 sides, by residential. It will do nothing to continue to raise the area. And in fact, I think will continue, it will bring it down.
The properties next door certainly won't be a better development than this. They're not going to be the medium density residential that we strived for and that our neighbors that participated in the planning efforts also wanted. I also wanted to comment, we recently moved our offices and I wasn't too concerned about being next door to a self-storage facility. I can tell you now we have a great landlord who keeps things cleaned up, but I can tell you that they're pretty awful to be next door to. People that use them come in and out all the times of day and night. They leave trash all over the place. Apparently they decide they're not going to use the locker anymore. And we've come out and there's huge TVs and tires and clothes strewn about. Now our landlord is excellent and keeps it cleaned up, but this is next to a residential area. I think it's totally inappropriate use. Thank you. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from Ms. Herman? Okay.
Claudia Baker.
Ms. Baker, as you take yourself off mute, please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Claudia Baker. I live at 100 Northeast 43rd Terrace, Kansas City, Missouri, 64116. It's in the 4th District, and I am a block and a half west of North Oak Traffic Way. I participated in the planning for the North Oak Corridor several years ago, which was an exciting process, city-led, and we had a lot of participation from neighbors and others. And I just want to say that the proposed development does not comply with those city-led planning processes, both the North Oak Corridor as well as the Briarcliff Wynwood plan. And those plans were developed with input from neighbors and volunteers and those that are really interested in the future of the Northland. So significant public and private resources have been invested in the North Oak Corridor recently, and we are hoping that the plans, though they are dated at this point, will still have a hope of being implemented. The North Oak Corridor Plan was in 2006, and it recommended that the property be used for medium density residential development. The Briarcliff Wynwood Area Plan in 2009 also recommended that the property should be medium residential mixed-use development, and both of them recommended that any development, residential, be both transit and pedestrian oriented. A self-storage development is incompatible with the recommendations of both of these plans. And I think, as Deb Herman mentioned, on two sides, this property abuts all existing residential. And so what we would like to see is the kind of development that really enhances, adds value, complements the neighborhoods and the residential that surrounds North Oak Traffic Way. It's a major artery into the Northland, a gateway. We'd like it to be more beautiful, and we'd like it to be more neighborhood friendly.
Okay, Ms. Baker, yep, your time's up. Thank you.
Laura Spywak.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I don't want to really reiterate too much of what has already been said, but I do believe that the land use is not proper for the area according to the North Oak Corridor Plan and the Briarcliff Wynwood Area Plan. I also believe that putting a self-storage development there could negatively impact future developers looking at the area as a gateway to the Northland. I would like to keep the impact to the neighborhoods a positive impact and see positive development along the corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, Joe?
That's it.
Okay. This time we'll go ahead and close public testimony then. So applicants have heard a lot of testimony from the neighbors, may not be the right fit for the area. They're on North Oak and is not supportive or not a part of the North Oak corridor plan either. Any comments on that?
I tend to agree with that. I'd really like to see more self-storage consider another tenant at the ground level. We're seeing that in other instances outside of Kansas City. So I just think that this would be a great opportunity to work with the neighborhood, figure out if there can be some small commercial space just to activate that first floor. I don't have an issue necessarily with storage. I think it actually makes for a really complementary use if you do have some, a lot of that retail along there is a first floor retail. So, if you complement that by making more density and adding storage above it, I'm for it. But I think as long as the project is as it is today, I would recommend deny.
I'm certainly sympathetic to the views we heard. I feel that, council might be the better place to hear those, and that I have a hard time, deciding otherwise based upon what I would want in my neighborhood. And so again, I'm very sympathetic. It's tough to see something that, we'd like to down zone, but it doesn't get down zoned. And I totally understand how that happens. This isn't the first time we've seen something like this. And so again, sympathetic to it. I'll be supportive as it stands now, but I would also appreciate greater thought about how, and I don't think it's anyone's job necessarily, but how the self-storage industry or how the city can down zone and how we can make the use more compatible with neighborhoods, because I wouldn't want that in my backyard either.
I guess I'll chime in here. I'll be recommending denial. I think this is a really bad use of land in North Oak Trafficway. I think it's going to be one of those projects that if it moves forward in about 10 to 15 years, you're going to wonder why it was approved at that moment in time. These are really just not great developments along what is already a transit corridor and potentially could have light rail in the next 15 to 20 years going up North Oak. It's hard for me to approve this as is, so I'll be voting for denial.
Okay, before we go on other comments from the commission, I want to make sure that we closed public testimony.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And I hadn't heard back from the applicant on any of the discussion from the public testimony. Maybe that was, they don't have any, or just not sure. This would be a good time to talk about that now.
I know Thomas Nolte is still on, and Strickland Construction is also on.
We did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Ty Zahner again. At recommendation of staff, we did hold 2 neighborhood meetings. Those were both attended by local neighbors, and for the most part, the neighbors, and we have the notes from that meeting, were supportive of this project. The NNI organization, which is a larger affiliate of, it's a conglomerate of people that support it are speaking out against it. But at our local neighborhood meeting, it was pretty supported by the neighbors.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so we'll go ahead and close all testimony then and speak amongst the commission. I think we've already kind of started with some of the statements, which is okay. Anybody else have comments?
I'll be denying it. I don't testimonies today.
Commissioner, can you speak into the mic? It's even hard for me to hear you.
Sorry. I'm listening to the neighborhood feedback today, and I'm also struggling whether it actually meets the intent of the neighborhood plan or overlay. So it's a denial for me today.
Okay. And just my thoughts too. I mean, I think it'll be a nice looking building. However, with the location that it is, North Oak has had a lot of challenges in the past as to the development and what's happened in that whole area. So they've done a great job of getting together, putting a plan together to improve that whole corridor from North Kansas City all the way past Berry Road. And it doesn't seem that in this particular instance, this is the fully right fit for that area. So I'm not in support of this project either.
I'll add one more thought, and I like and appreciate the way it seems like this one's going to go. I somehow got stuck on some industry newsletters for self-storage, and I will just say that what some would contend is that it is, and I haven't seen it happen in real life, but it's a nice idea, is that this can be a good intermediary use. And in the same way, I think it's Lifetime Fitness builds their building so that they can be converted to office if the gym doesn't work out. In theory, some self-storage people believe that it's a good intermediary use for an area, and that it's one of the low-lying things that gets picked off when you redevelop. So I'll just note it, but again, appreciate the way that it seems like my fellow commissioners are going to vote on this.
I'll take a motion, please.
Chair Corral, I recommend or I move for docket item 2 to be denied.
Second.
So I've got a motion and a second for denial of docket item number 2. Lisa, can you take roll call, please?
Commissioner Allender,
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Beasley,
Aye.
Corral,
Aye.
Enders,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
and Sadowski. Aye.
Okay, it looks like the motion passes 8-9 for denial of docket item number 2. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and move on to docket item number 3. And I think we have one recusal.
One recusal, yes. Even though I don't work for Black and Veatch anymore, I still own stock in the company. So I'll be recusing for myself from this case. Thanks.
All right, docket item 3 is case number CPC 2022-00058. A request to rezone to district MPD master plan development and approve a preliminary development plan, which also serves as a preliminary plat, to allow for the construction of a data center campus on about 360 acres at the northeast corner of Highway 169 and Interstate 435. Genevieve Kahn is the staff planner.
Morning.
Morning.
Hey, docket item number 3 before you is for a rezoning to MPD for the Rocky Branch Creek Technology Park. Site is generally located in one of the northernmost parts of the city, just north of I-435 and east of Highway 169. Subject site includes 3 parcels that will combined, totaling approximately 360 acres. You may recall the data center across the street on the west side of 169, the Golden Plains project that was approved a few years ago. Here is the site plan. It includes 12 buildings arranged in pairs. The road that will provide access to the development off of Highway 169 will be a public network starting with Northwest 128th Street coming across, and then North Main Street coming down through the site, and then Northwest 122nd coming across to serve these buildings. And then eventually this road will connect over the stream and then up to 126th Street. This slide shows a close-up of what each building pair will look like. The front of the buildings will have office space to sort of that notches out here to cover this interior equipment storage area. So it will not be seen when you're looking straight on at the buildings. And then here's the stream buffer plan that was submitted there. There's the main stream through here and then a couple of offshoots. And the layout of the buildings is avoiding most of the stream areas. However, there is this section and stream buffer plans. There were some preliminary reviews, but the stream buffer plan will go through a more rigorous review with the water department now that I believe we've switched stream buffer reviews from land development to water services. So this will continue to be go through the review process. And then here's the preliminary landscape plan. Because the site is so large, staff conditioned to have more detailed landscaping plans reviewed at the time of the Mpd final plan. However, the rezoning to Mpd here is for enhanced protection of natural resources. And this site contains kind of a mixture of some wooded areas, some land that was previously used for crop agriculture. So these different sections here that are laid out will be going back to grassland areas, prairie, wooded areas, some ponds that are existing, riparian vegetation, the streams. So hopefully converting this back to something maybe that it was before it was used for agriculture. And then here are the elevations provided. The primary building materials are cast concrete, and the front, which I have a rendering of, also has a little bit more articulation. So what you see from the entrance will look more like this. And then the sides that really hold, all the equipment, all the areas that won't have windows will be along the sides. The front will have more articulation. And then here's just a couple of street views. This little paved area is where 128th will come across the site when you're on 169. And then this is the south edge of the site. I also forgot to mention in the site plan, there is an easement that for the planned Rocky Branch Creek Trail, that's in the KC Trails plan. And there's some more details about that in my staff report. And then just a few changes to the conditions. After the staff report was posted, there was continued conversation with the applicant team and staff. And so we're requesting the following changes be made to condition number 1 regarding the Mpd final plans, taking out that each building or building pair, those going together, for it to read an Mpd final plan for each building pair, or a maximum of 3 building pairs will be reviewed and approved by the commission. And then number 12 is regarding the public street standards that those public roads will need to be built to. And the applicant requested this language that any deviations that they may request, that has not been discussed at this time, but any deviations that they may request in the future be approved by the Transportation and Development Committee and Public Works Department, which is fairly standard. And then lastly, removing condition number 15, which is a duplicate condition regarding the stream buffer. There is another stream buffer condition that says basically the same thing. So we're asking for number 15 to be removed. And then staff recommends approval subject to the conditions and the modifications that I just described. I can take any questions.
Any questions from the commission?
Two questions. One, what are the gravel? What's the storage yard part?
That might be a better question for the applicant to elaborate on.
And then the max of 3 building pairs, that's just the idea that once 3 pairs have been approved, the other ones would follow suit, and therefore.
So in the discussion originally, it's typical like each phase to have its own Mpd final plan so we can review the details, and then, you all that's a consent item. In this case, since it's such a large project, we went back and forth to say, you can do 2 building pairs in one MPD final plan, just so that our procedures align with their plans for construction. And so what we ended on was 3 building pairs, essentially to have 2 total MPD final plans, maybe doing sort of a phase 1 with these first 3 buildings, and then phase 2. This is anticipated to be something like a 10 to 20 year project. So we don't want to approve everything in one MPD final plan now and then have it 20 years later. Now it's actually being built. That was the logic there.
Can you talk a little bit about, I don't know if we've had a discussion about the switch from the stream easement moving into the authority of water. Can you talk about how that changes the process? Or maybe
I
Joe.
also, I think, yeah, in terms, I think everything is the same process it has been, and correct me if I'm wrong.
I
It's
can address
rather
that.
than the land development division reviewing
Oh,
the
Travis
stream
is
buffer
on it.
plan. Oh, Travis, yeah, if you want to jump it, that'd be great.
Yeah, and it's really the review process. So the permitting process is still handled the same way it always was. As far as the applications coming in, it's just a review is set in there for KC Water. So KC Water becomes the reviewing authority on it. But as far as the permitting process, all that has stayed the same.
So in this case, are they asking for some kind of variance on that buffer from the water department?
No, that would be in their plan. So they, with the development, they would either have to do remediation or add to their stream buffer area for areas within the stream buffer that are disturbed.
Okay. Some kind of solution that would redirect the water properly, I guess, would be
Correct.
that. Okay.
I had just a few questions, or just one question. I know that you guys had mentioned in the comprehensive plan that you guys were looking at maybe some special focus on data centers, and I was wondering if that had any influence on kind of how you guys worked with the client or the applicant to develop this plan. It may not be in development yet, but I was just wondering about that.
I don't think we used anything in particular from the comprehensive plan. I know that this data center use is becoming very prevalent here. And so I think that's the plan for the new playbook, but none of that's been adopted, obviously. So whatever is in there has not necessarily been applied to this project.
And I guess my last question, and maybe this is something that we haven't addressed, but these are highly water intensive uses. What kind of considerations go into, I think they've done a good job with the green infrastructure and kind of areas, but was there any consideration on staff and water department on kind of the use when it comes to this? It's not residential or even commercial. It's a very unique use when it comes to water use.
Right, and before any of these sites tend to locate or pick a location, there's usually a lot of discussion about volume of water, quality of water, and that sort of thing that go into siting these data centers. We also, depending on proximity, we've had discussions of what we call purple line or reuse of wastewater that's been treated for some of the cooling sites, but to date, that hasn't been economically feasible for the data centers that have chosen Kansas City as their home.
Okay, any other questions from the commission to city staff? Okay, seeing none, before I move forward on the case, I've got just an announcement to make here. Since it's close to 11, I really doubt we're going to go past 1 o'clock on our meeting. So therefore, we will not have lunch today. But I do propose a 15-minute break after we're done with this docket item. So Again, we will not have lunch. We should be done before 1. And, but we will have a 15-minute break after this docket item. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and welcome the applicant then to docket item number 3, please. The applicant's available. You can go ahead and sit down if you like, or if you prefer to stand, either way. It's up to you.
We can swap seats.
Is Jim Hauser part of the applicant team? He's raised his hand. Okay, I'll admit him.
Is there anybody else online that's representing the applicant by chance?
Matt Kist.
There'll be a few who jump in and out, I think.
Can you say that in the microphone? I can't hear.
There should be a few members who jump in and out. Thank you. Thank you very much. Morning, commissioners. John Michael Handley, project manager for Diode Ventures, 11401 Lamar Avenue, Overland Park, Kansas. Here today to talk to you all about our preliminary plan and rezoning to MPD application for Rocky Branch Creek Technology Park. Is that showing? Let's do this. I just have to make this. Perfect.
You can sit down if you want.
So as mentioned, Rocky Branch Creek Technology Park is planned on approximately.
Hold the microphone up to you and speak directly on that. Thank you.
As mentioned, Rocky Branch Creek is planned for approximately 360 acres in the northeast corner of I-435 and Highway 169, directly east of Golden Plains Technology Park, as mentioned. We're bounded on the south by 435, to the north and east by the namesake Rocky Branch Creek, and to the west across the parcel by Highway 169. The current zoning is actually a mixture of residential and B3-2, although the current usage is agriculture. The proposed use of data centers didn't fit within that mixture of zoning, and so the decision to move forward with an MPD rezoning was made. There are really a few factors behind why we chose to go through MPD rather than any other kind of zoning designation. As mentioned, the primary use, or the kind of application line, is that it's for the protection of natural resources. This is a lot of land. And although the floor area ratio is just shy of 0.3, that does provide us a lot of flexibility in how we can move forward with things like BMPs, with restoration, and with conservation. Additionally, a master plan development district gives us the opportunity for a little bit of design freedom to prevent us from having to ask for substantial deviations. The two primary cases for that are maximum building height. You'll note that for our proposed zoning district, we are suggesting a maximum building height of 70 feet. The buildings proper actually only go up to 60 feet. There's a 10-foot stairwell protection included in this 70. Additionally, and kind of tying into that protection of natural resources component, a reduction in the required amount of parking spaces based on kind of typical zoning is something that we're proposing. If we were to stick with, say, the B3-2 zoning designation, based on the size of each of these buildings, we'd be talking about over 500 parking spaces per square feet. It's a lot, per building. It's a lot of parking spaces. It's a lot of either paving over natural land or producing very expensive, very concrete intensive, and ultimately very empty parking garages. And so just understanding kind of our end user and the kind of shifts and employment that they're expecting, we're proposing essentially a minimum of 60 spaces per building with the option to expand to 120. That's not something we expect really any of the buildings to need to expand to, but we wanted to have that built in just in case for kind of our safety, as well as for you all to know that we have a backup plan if necessary. Moving on to the site layout itself, as mentioned, this is 12 buildings, 6 pairs. Each building is just shy of 360,000 square feet for a grand total of just under 4.25 million square feet of floor space. The intent is to phase these buildings in by pair, basically starting in the north and working counterclockwise. There's also 3 project substations located on site. The design for these isn't complete, obviously, and so the sizes of these is more likely to shrink than anything. And so we just wanted to make sure we had those identified on the site plan for the Plan Commission. And as noted during the staff presentation, really the majority of the infrastructure improvement that's worth noting is those 3 streets that would be added in as public right of way. So while the building pairs themselves are private, and those drives up to those building pairs would be private, these Northwest 128th Street, North Main Street, and Northwest 122nd Street would be public right of way. And the connection across Rocky Branch Creek for potential future uses is something that we're interested in, and not only for providing a secondary point of access and egress for the development, but also for providing connectivity for the folks to our east over to Highway 169, as well as for an alternative for these folks to get to 435. When we were here a couple of years ago for Golden Plains Technology Park, we touched on a couple of points for why Kansas City is a great fit for data center usage. And this area in particular is highly beneficial because of its proximity to MCI and downtown. But additionally, it's far enough out of the way that this provides a really nice kind of low intensity, but higher and better use than, say, agriculture. The development does include water and wastewater infrastructure improvements, and addressing one of the questions that was brought up. Typically, data centers would be high water usage customers for the utility. However, these data centers are intended to be air cooled. And so after basically getting started up, they would look no different from a use perspective than the domestic use that's underneath them. Some additional context with this MPD request. There are a lot of trees. This is a rendering, but there are a lot of trees on site. There's a lot of natural flora and fauna that, for all intents and purposes, we'd like to keep whatever we can. We've also, as mentioned, intend to grant a 50-foot trail easement on the south side of the property to our right here on this presentation. We did have the opportunity to host our public engagement meeting 2 weeks ago today. We did submit the notes and attendee list. We had just a couple of attendees, but the primary questions and concerns really centered around that connection across Rocky Branch Creek. There is a neighbor whose house is in proximity to where that transportation improvement would be placed. And so we just noted that for kind of future notes for ourselves, but then also work to ensure that those residents had access to the Transportation and Planning Committee's docket and contact information for the right folks so that they can count on not just us to keep them up to date, but then also have some folks at the city who can really make sure they're involved. One of the other things that we encountered during the rezoning for Golden Plains across the highway was a concern for a diversity of uses within the Northland of Kansas City, especially concentrated in this area. Diode actually controls or owns the parcels identified in white and yellow here. Due to the proximity to the highway, these parcels are really a good fit for future residential, commercial, industrial. Those aren't really uses that we tend to get involved with. And so those are parcels, those yellow ones, that we've set aside for future development by others, non-data center. So as discussed, we do have a preliminary stream buffer plan submitted. We will be working based on some of our wetland and water of the U.S. delineation study, as well as some of our conversations with the Corps of Engineers and our jurisdictional determination on a couple of these buffer areas. There's an intent to work with the city on revising a couple of points of the natural resources map layer, just where survey and the Corps don't necessarily feel that some of those resources are high value and worth protecting. For this iteration of the design, we did not have the opportunity or requirement to submit a grading plan at this stage. However, we did want to note that generally here in the gray areas, we can expect to be the limits of disturbance at minimum. These are kind of the envelopes of the building pairs as well as the public rights of way. Just some final locational context. For Golden Plains, we were in conversations with 3 separate school districts. For this particular development, we sit entirely within the Smithville R2 school district. We've had a couple of conversations with them so far. and intend to keep those conversations going. We're excited to be a good partner with them in providing a low service use development. We're not sending 100 single family homes worth of kids up their direction, and instead we'll be kind of taking up land. Just to close out, did want to highlight a lot of our development team is local. That's something we pride ourselves on. So aside from Diode Ventures and our parent company, Black and Veatch, working on the development and civil and environmental support, we've also had support from Trek Design Group for our initial traffic study and Kimley Horn for additional civil support and the final traffic study. Lorax Design Group is the landscape architect on record for this application. And some of our initial architectural support came from Belknap Associates out of the Metro as well. So with that, I'm happy to turn over and answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I have one. On the one side,
Can
that you had shown in yellow, property for future development. Yes, that one. Is that included in the MPD that we're looking at, or is that completely separate?
That is completely separate. So the balance of 500, that 140 acres is not included.
Thank you.
I don't know much about data centers, so I was wondering if you could explain the gravel electric storage yard area.
Yeah, so that'll house a lot of the electrical and mechanical equipment that a lot of buildings would normally put on their roofs. So this you would consider air handlers, battery backup storage systems, especially. I think that comprises the bulk of it.
So it's gravel, so it's pervious, and then there's vehicles can access back there, and then you just put all your systems there as opposed to on the roof, you're saying?
That's correct.
Got it. Thanks.
It's not pervious, just letting you know, they consider that impervious.
Thank you. Yes.
How many employees, you might have said that already, are on site?
I didn't. I think at full build out, we can expect somewhere between 10 and 20 employees per building, in addition to whatever contractors would be supporting the development as a whole.
Have you considered solar on the site, either on the buildings themselves or on, I know you have because you're Black and Veatch, and of course you would, but just wanted to hear if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so that was something that very early on the consideration was made. And unfortunately, if the intent is to protect the landscape as is, in order to put enough solar to really make a difference in the scope of this development, we would be tearing up a lot of that land and ultimately, I think, doing more harm than good. Additionally, there's some complications when it comes to how that kind of power would interact with the grid and the Nashua substation there. Essentially, interconnecting into that would have us go through a process that would take probably 6 or 7 years. And so ultimately, it's not a high enough return for that kind of effort and that kind of net benefit-ish to the development to really put solar on these.
Is that something where you can accommodate? Because I know our new code is going to have solar ready language in it. Is it something you can accommodate in terms of the way the building is programmed for solar in the future if there is an opportunity?
That's truthfully beyond my expertise. And I don't know if any of my project team would be able to respond to that either. If you have that language though, or if you can share that later on, I think that's something that we could find an answer for.
Any other questions?
Yes, is this owner occupied or you're building for someone else to come in?
There's a customer in line for this.
Seeing no further questions, let's go ahead and open it up for public testimony. If there's anybody out there from the public that would like to speak regarding docket item number 3, please come forward or raise your hand using the Zoom feature. And do you mind if we can stop sharing your screen there so we can see everybody?
Mr. Chair, I see no one in the chamber wishing to speak and no one has raised their hand on Zoom.
No one's raised their hand? Okay, so we'll go ahead and close public testimony then. Any other item you'd like to discuss or any other questions from the commission? Okay, So seeing none, I'll close all testimony then and speak amongst the commission, or if there's nothing to discuss, I'll take a motion, please.
I just have a question. Overall, I think it's a really great project. I hope we look forward to passing it. One thing I wasn't clear on by looking at the traffic impact study as well as the staff reports, is this development calls for a number of new streets or extensions to be connected. Is that the responsibility of the city or is that the developer?
My assumption is it's going to boil down to the developer. Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to have a lot of internal streets, which are going to make them public. So they would be at the expense of the developer.
The only public streets that they're not required to build are the major streets, which they have to pay an impact fee to help support the construction of those.
Any other discussion? I'll take a motion, please.
Chair Crow, I move for the approval of docket item 3. Sorry, I got so many screens on. Docket item 3, as stated with conditions. And the revisions of the conditions, sorry.
Yep. We need to go through those.
You want to pull those back up? I'll read them.
So I think condition 1 was to modify.
Yes,
Or-
modifications to condition number 1. Sorry, I will just pull them up. Conditions number 1 and 12 and removing number 15.
Okay. For Carl, I move for the approval of docket item 3 with conditions stated with modifications to number 1, 12, and remove condition 15.
As
Do I need to
per-
read that?
No,
As per-
no, if I just say as per staff.
As
discussion.
per staff discussion.
There we go.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second for approval of docket item number 3 and modifying 3 conditions as stated. Lisa, can you take roll call on that motion, please?
Commissioner Baker,
Aye.
Beasley,
Aye.
Crowe,
Aye.
Enders,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
and Sadowski. Aye.
Okay, it looks like the motion passes 8-0 from our standpoint. We appreciate you bringing it in and good luck. Okay, at this time, we're going to take a 15-minute break to stretch our legs and maybe get another cup of coffee here. So we'll be back. It's 11:15-ish right now, so we'll be back by 11:30.
I promise you.
Isn't a lot.
Wait.
Question, I hope next time it can play out here to help all the noise.
Right after.
Sorry. This one. Oh, you have no faith. You named it something easy.
re-recording the meeting again? All right. There it is.
was my
Is
voice.
the applicant back for docket item number 4? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and thank you, everybody, for the little break here. Let's reconvene the meeting and try to wrap this up before 1 o'clock. So we're on docket item number 4, please, Joe.
Docket item 4 is case number CPC 2022-00169, approving an amendment to a previously approved preliminary development plan in District Mpd on about 80 acres to expand the existing Mpd district boundaries to the east by approximately 1.75 acres in an area generally bounded by the Missouri River on the north and west, I-29 on the east, and the railroad tracks on the south. Andrew Clark is the staff planner.
Good morning, Chairman Crowell and fellow commissioners. I will share the screen. As Joe said, this is docket number 4, CPC 2022-169. This is a rezoning to MPD. It's a major amendment for the Berkeley Riverfront Master Plan development. And the request is to add roughly an additional 1.75 acres to the existing boundaries. The site is located right on the Missouri River and just west of I-29, I-35, Kit Bond Bridge. Hatched here is the project location. And this is showing roughly the additional area that will be added. And right here, you can see parcel 8 is where the KC Current Stadium will be located. And in the light purple is the land that was acquired from MoDOT to make this project feasible. The existing parcel was just a little too small for the stadium footprint. Just to remind you, this is the proposed stadium. And you can see in the distance is roughly the area that's been added behind the stadium. And here is another rendering. Staff's recommendation is approval with conditions. And I also have Mr. Purvis here with the Port Authority if you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Okay, go ahead. Welcome, applicant.
Thank you. My name is Christian Purvis. I'm a Senior Development Manager with the Port Authority of Kansas City. And as Andy just explained to you, this is just a addition of additional acreage that we acquired from MoDOT. This was approved on September 6th by the Missouri Highway Transportation Committee for purchase and sale and acquisition by Port KC from MoDOT. The real thought here was that the KC Current Stadium located on parcel 8 of our MPD was too small for the full footprint. So they asked for excess right-of-way land from MoDOT. And so we went through the full process of review. We obtained a lease with purchase option and then a sale agreement from MoDOT through a multi-month process. And then that is going to be added to the leasehold with the KC Current. So they will be required to maintain all of the additional acreage that is being proposed today as part of their leasehold agreement.
Yeah, very good. Any questions for the applicant?
Did you say leasehold or do they purchase it?
It's a 50-year leasehold with the Port Authority.
Anybody else with any questions? Okay, at this time, let's go ahead and open it up for public testimony. If there's anybody out there in the public that would like to speak regarding docket item number 4, please come forward or raise your hand using the Zoom feature and you'll be called upon.
Mr. Chair, it appears no one in the chamber wishes to speak and no one has raised their hand online.
Okay. Anything else to add to the case?
Not for me. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Meant to say we are closing public testimony as well. So
First game.
can you provide a little schedule? What's going on with the stadium? I know they just had the groundbreaking, but
Absolutely.
anything else?
Yes. So I guess 2 Thursdays ago, we had the formal groundbreaking. The mayor was there, the governor was there. Angie and Chris Long and Brittany Mahomes, the ownership team, was there to conduct the festivities. I think we had about 3,000 people show up. It was a wonderful time if any of you were there. But that really kicked off the formal breaking of ground and construction schedule for the project. We've gone through all of this is the last step for full approval of the stadium until we go to their Mpd final plan approval. But assuming that we get that approval and the Section 408 approval from the Army Corps of Engineers, we should be off to the races with mass grading and construction. So timeline is from now until, I guess, substantial completion will be in February of 2024, final completion in March of 24, and then hopefully their first game in April of 2024.
Very good. Yep. Thank you.
And you'll see the MPD final plan on November 15th. It was held up due to the traffic analysis that's being done with Public Works and MoDOT. We had hoped that you would have seen it about a month ago.
Yeah. Okay. Darn engineers.
Yep. We did have a full traffic impact study conducted by Olson Engineers. Because of the nature of a destination facility like this, 11,500 seat stadium brings in a lot of traffic impacts. So we did a full blown TIS and an event management operations plan. So we would understand like what does circulation look like and fluidity with traffic and parking and all of that. So we have received a draft and we're going to get the final from Olson shortly.
Thank you. Appreciate the update. With
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Have you shared that traffic impact with the
We have, yes. And is it Jeff Bryan from Public Works is reviewing it right now, along with the MoDOT folks we've been liaising with.
so they can prepare themselves?
Correct. Yes.
I'll take a motion, please.
Chairman Crowe, I make a motion that
4, clear up to 4.
document number 4.
Second.
So I've got a motion and a second for approval of docket item number 4. Lisa, can you take roll call, please, on that motion?
Commissioner Allender,
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Beasley,
Aye.
Crowell,
Aye.
Enders,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Rojas,
Aye.
and Sadowski.
Aye.
Okay, it looks like the motion passes 8-0 for approval of docket item 4. Thank you, and
Very much.
look forward to seeing you here in a month or so.
All right. See you soon. Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on to docket item number 9. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Good.
Docket item 9 is case CPC 2022-00161. Request to approve a rezoning to District UR and a preliminary development plan, which also acts as a preliminary plat to allow for the construction of 252 residential units on about 20 acres at East 93rd Street and Old Santa Fe Road. Andrew Clark is again the staff planner of this project.
Okay, share the screen here. All right, this is docket number 9. The depot on Old Santa Fe. This is a rezoning from UR to UR for a residential development plan. And it will also serve as a preliminary plat. This is located in an area that we've seen a lot of activity, Bannister 435 in the southeast quadrant of the city. You can see it outlined in yellow here. I also wanted to have you understand that there is a stream running through the northern edge of this site. And the topography here is quite a challenge. It is also another factor as to why the site has probably never been developed. It's a challenging site with the creek and the topography. Here is a photo of the existing site conditions at 93rd and Old Santa Fe. You can see this is important that the sidewalks have been improved and not necessarily entirely improved. It's because of the water runoff issues over here and the topography. Again, I wanted to highlight that there were improvements made on Old Santa Fe, but the existing conditions sure prevailed over these improvements that were made. Also, this is an important photo of East 91st Street. According to the city, they call it a street. It's technically an access way for Kansas City Southern to get to the rail line that's on the western perimeter of the site. And then also you can see where the creek is running through the northern edge of the site. And then another view, this is if you were standing on the south end of their site looking north, I wanted you to understand the rolling topography that plays into the proposed site design. Here is the site plan. It's going to be 7 individual buildings with a variety of unit types, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom. Highlighted in yellow are the pedestrian crosswalks. There are 2 crosswalks that are close to the clubhouse that will be raised, and the applicant will make those raised crosswalks. It was staff's concern that this is going to be a busy area, especially with 252 units. That's a lot of people on a nice day using the clubhouse and pool. So we want to make sure that vehicles are forced to slow down. If you read the staff report, I did applaud the applicant for not just providing a tree removal plan, which is really difficult for staff to get from our applicants, but a tree removal plan that actually has meaning behind it. So the Kittle Group did provide this really well done tree removal plan that tells us which trees will be removed. They do have a goal of preserving 45% of the trees on site. And they also have an ambitious goal of keeping the larger caliper trees along Old Santa Fe and East 93rd, compared to what we see a lot of the time where all the trees are removed and then baby street trees are put in place that will take years to grow. Here is the overall landscape plan. The applicant will be required to submit a UR final plan to work with staff in the future to enhance the landscape plan a little bit more in some areas, nothing big. But overall, the plan does comply with the zoning and development code. And this is a slide of the elevations. Staff did condition that the applicant continue to work with development management staff. Overall, the site design is great and complements the existing area. But at the top of this elevation, you can see there's a proposed vinyl material. And I think you've seen in the past, we're pretty tough on vinyl being a proposed building material. And I just wanted this to be a fair playing field for everyone that submits an application here, that we really know what kind of vinyl is being proposed and try to see if we can get a higher quality building material. And the applicant has accepted that condition to work with staff when they submit their UR final plan. Here's the clubhouse, and it's high quality building materials. Overall, staff does recommend approval with conditions. The applicant is also seeking a request for a recommendation of approval to waive the half street improvements to East 91st Street. I showed you in that slide, it's not technically necessarily a street. It's only used by the railroad. And with these difficult site conditions over here, the applicant's already going to be doing half street improvements to East 93rd and Old Santa Fe. And to keep the cost down, staff supports waiving half-street improvements to East 91st. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission to city staff?
I do have one. I see entrance.
There is one entrance, because of the topography. The fire department did bring this up in our site review or our development review committee several times. And Brenda, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, there are actually two
Yep.
entrances. One, we would prefer to leave, this is going to be a gated community. And so we would prefer to leave that for emergency vehicles only, but we're certainly open to making it a second entrance.
So the south one, Commissioner Beasley, they would hope to leave closed and it would only be used in case of emergencies.
So the top right one would be the only.
Would be
There.
the primary entrance.
Fires department is good with that.
Because of the topography, the fire department said as long as they have access, if they need to get in there, the gate will open. It's a Yelp gate. So the fire department was okay to condition this project with that proposed entrance.
So then that reinforces to me why you required the raised walkways to the clubhouse, because the clubhouse is right there by the entrance, if I'm looking at that correctly. Right?
Yes, because the idea was the only entrance would be the north entrance off of Old Santa Fe. So that crosswalk, those vehicles would be forced to go over. And we didn't put any more raised pedestrian crossings on that secondary entrance. Also, the engineers cited stormwater runoff concerns with the way the site is oriented. It's really difficult for us to get raised pedestrian crosswalks, I've come to find. Because of the
I'm
engineers.
pleased. I was just confirming what I was looking at from your description of what you were doing.
Okay.
I have I think you raised it and I haven't actually asked the question today yet, but stormwater management, or I can wait for the applicant, but can you just outline what you're doing there? Sounds like you've had on the site. How are you mitigating that?
I can leave that towards Brenda, or if Jim is on the call.
Let's go ahead and welcome the applicant in, if you don't mind. And so applicant, welcome. If you don't mind stating your name and address for the record, that would be great.
Brenda Haddad, 3014 Delaware Avenue, Joplin, Missouri, representing Kittle Development Group. Yes, and I believe Jim is on for stormwater. I think I will let him speak to that. Jim, are you there?
There is someone named Jim who's in the attendee list but hasn't raised their hand. And that's all I have on him is just the name Jim.
There we go.
Now he's raising his hand. Okay.
Jim, are you there?
He's going to promote him.
I'm promoting him right now. He should be able to speak momentarily.
If not, the architect is also on.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What was the question again? I apologize.
First, let's start name and address for the record.
Oh. All right. Jim Cherney. I'm with SE3 LLC. We are at 8401 EM 350 Highway, Kansas City, Missouri, 64133.
Thank you. I think the question was just the stormwater management on the site and how that will be done. In particular, any green solutions you're looking at for this, for the stormwater management?
So at this point, we are looking at detention design, and this would be to the north of the development, but to the south of the creek that goes right through there. We haven't gotten far enough along actually to provide any BMP type solutions beyond detention. But as far as that, as far as the creek goes, we will be outside of the creek area. And, you know, so there's the there's the stormwater plan that the stormwater plan that's part of this. And we will not be disturbing very much of that creek area, but the detention basin itself will be just to the south of where the creek is located and to the north of the clubhouse.
Are you looking at green infrastructure as a part of that detention basin?
Yes. And again, we're not far enough along to be able to provide very much detail on that, but yeah.
Right.
Any other questions from the commission?
Are you all open to changing the vinyl to another material?
Well, actually, and we would like to provide a sample of it. This is 4-inch vinyl. It's actually proven to be better than the cement board. We've used both in our products or in other cities. And for a while we did, solely cement board. And then we found this 4-inch vinyl. There's some, actually some issues right now with being able to purchase it, the cement board. And so we found this to not only be more cost effective, but it's actually a superior product. And we would like the opportunity to present it to staff, but we're definitely open to cement board if they're not satisfied with the results of that.
The warranty the same? Is it similar?
I think it's, Beth, can you speak to that? I believe it's actually a little bit longer. Our architect is also on the line.
I've just promoted Beth.
She's moving through the.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you talk
Hi.
warranty of the vinyl that we use?
Yes, so we've been using, of course, it'll be something comparable depending on what's available in that market. But in the past, we've used an all-side brand vinyl. The product is Odyssey Plus. It's considered one of their premium vinyls. It is 0.044 inches thick. I do not know the warranty period on it, but I can certainly find that out. The other thing that we do, even when we do use a vinyl siding, we still use a fiber cement trim around it. So instead of just having the corners with J channels and kind of typical vinyl detailing, we trim it out with the fiber cement boards, which gives it a much more finished look and makes it more durable and more attractive as well.
And just to clarify, that would be for the lap siding as well as that board and batten at the gable?
So this particular product does have a board and batten option as well. So we have in the past used, and I've got some photographs from a previous project that actually has this product on it that we can certainly share with staff, but they have a lap siding and they have a board and batten version, which is basically just got a vertical detailing in it.
Okay.
And Commissioner Sadowski, we are willing to work with the applicant, but as you know, there's so many types of vinyl. When you see it on a rendering, I just can't trust what I see on a rendering.
Yeah, I'm curious about the product. I've never, as an architect, never specified that. So
It's fairly new for us, but we've had great success with it. And yes, we're working on getting samples now that we can actually present.
Is that kind of covered under condition 7?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and open it up for public testimony then. If there's anybody from the public that would like to speak regarding docket item number 9, looks like you need to raise your hand on the Zoom feature.
Mr. Chair, there's no one in the chamber, but John Schumacher on Zoom has raised his hand and I've asked him to accept promotion. Looks like he just joined.
Okay.
Hello?
Hi, I'm Mr. Schumacher. State your name and address for the record, please.
John Schumacher, the family lands are catty cornered from this development over at 6601 East 93rd Street.
Okay.
First off, want to say thank you to staff. Staff has been very helpful in answering questions for this and the other projects in the area. I'm really pleased to see this development plan. That is a very challenging site. I've been walking over that ground for almost 50 years. This area presents some really interesting possibilities for the city and the developer. We're right along the National Historic Trails alignment. I'd like to remind us all that the Three Trails Corridor Plan that grew out of the Metro Green Plan, the vision was a trail basically connecting virtually Sugar Creek all the way through Raytown, Independence, South Kansas City, on over to Minor Park, and then eventually to State Line. We've got several segments of that trail in place. Just to the north on the Hickman Mill School property, that trail exists, and also exists over on 93rd Street, just to the southwest of this proposed development, along Schumacher Park. And also there's a gap right now with the development around the former Cerner site, but that trail picks up again on Bannister Road and Hillcrest. Wish I had a map, but I'm sure most staff is familiar with that area. That trail then extends all the way over to Grandview Road, crossing two interstates. We have two dedicated pedestrian bridges over I-49 and I-435. There are several $1 million of investment from city through PIAC, local private sources. A big chunk of this funding has come from the feds, Federal Highway Department, MoDOT, National Park Service. So the trail plan originally had that trail going down 91st Street up on the north, and then coming down the railroad tracks on the east side of that property. We kind of abandoned that idea because of the same problem the developer is struggling with. That creek to make an ADA bridge would be about $1 million. So we're certainly happy with that trail. I saw trail mentioned in the plan coming along the east side of that property, up where you showed the photograph where the sidewalk had washed out. Sidewalk hadn't been usable since it was built because of the overgrowth and the vegetation there. So it'd be nice to get this area cleaned up. So several of us in the area are happy with this. I would like to encourage folks to take a look at the trails that are already on the ground, and hopefully we can match construction of those. Park Service has provided some grants for some trails in the area, and they typically favor the 10-foot wide concrete surface, which is what we have in existence now. As this area develops more and more, we put people on the ground. I think these trails are going to be pretty important, especially if this, retail we're talking about over by Bannister and 435 takes off. We've been waiting for 25 years for this, and it's happening. So it's very encouraging to see. I'm encouraged with the developer. That's my primary concern, is to make sure that that trail gets put in ground, and we try to be consistent with what we have already on both sides of it. Second concern, somebody mentioned BMPs, and I really wonder, I know it's probably in our code, but 93rd Street's pretty flat until you get over to Old Santa Fe Road. And that would be a perfect place probably for green swales rather than curb and gutter. They're just going to shuttle that stormwater down to that nutty intersection and create additional stormwater. But I realize that takes more room. And so there may be an offset there, but certainly encourage that. As far as 91st Street, I would certainly endorse, yes, not making the developer improve that. There seems to be no reason. I'd rather that money go on improvements around to the east and to the south side. And then the third thing I'd like to just point out is this development hopefully goes forward, the other developments along 93rd over to Hillcrest. One thing that the city has kind of missed in our Blue Ridge streetscape plan and the Bannister streetscape plan is there is a little section of Old Santa Fe Road that connects 93rd Street to Blue Ridge. Right now, that's an incredible bottleneck. Very difficult even for fire trucks to get through there, especially when there's people that illegally park habitually up there. There are no curbs, a very narrow section of the street right there. And we open all these up, and eventually if Oracle begins to put people in those nice buildings to our north, I think we're going to have a real traffic congestion problem that's just sort of fallen through the cracks. And it's certainly not on this developer to fix that. But, perhaps we need to look bigger with staff about maybe improving that section, or even maybe both sides of 93rd Street in that area, maybe through Pyack or something like that. So anyway, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you to staff.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, Joe?
Oh, and I realized I forgot to use the timer, but that's because he thanked staff from the very start. So.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and close public testimony then. Any thoughts on the comments that were brought up? I mean, I think all of them have been addressed so far, it seems like. Oh, okay. Any other comments before?
Just that we had been meeting with Mr. Schumacher to see if we can find ways to, right now, the sidewalks are standard size. And we've been working with them to see if we can expand those to the 10 foot. Of course, we have to find the funding for that. But his group has been great. We're meeting on Friday to see if we can, as you can tell from the name, we've kind of embraced the historic aspect of this area, and we really just want to contribute to it. So.
Anything else?
To waive the half street improvements so that they have funding for that 10-foot wide sidewalk. Is that something that was conditioned that do we just need to read that as part of the approval, or I wasn't sure?
No, I think it's part of the conditions in there.
Okay,
So
so we don't have to make any changes. It was just being noted.
no, but I think there was a comment about the green, taking a look at the green infrastructure, making sure we have that. Because I don't see that in the language of the conditions.
And we can condition that when the UR final plan is submitted, I think in the past you've asked for a stormwater feasibility memo if they didn't provide any.
And to look at the feasibility of green infrastructure
along East 93rd, especially.
I just realized I had a clarifying question. You said gated community. Does that mean that there's a fence around the whole property, or just vehicle access at the gates?
Around the development itself, we're going to really, the northern part of the property is really not developable. And so we feel like this is a good opportunity to leave some green space there. So that part won't be gated, but the property, the development itself will be completely gated.
Okay. And I'm sorry to dig this up, but where is that fence line relative to the street?
Brenda, your fence line is on the north side of the creek. Is that just your?
No.
Okay.
No, it's, I believe the fence line would be just past the detention pond and the entrance.
You can vaguely see it. It's marked, it runs right into the guest parking at the clubhouse on the north end. And then it's set back, at least showing roughly 40 feet from Old Santa Fe.
Oh, okay. Guess I just didn't want to feel like people were walking along a fence line, right? Tucks back. That's helpful.
And it has the appearance of like wrought iron. It's not going to be like a privacy fence to where you can see out.
Four foot.
And I asked for those details on the UR final plan.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, anything else? All right, so let's go ahead and close testimony and speak amongst the commission, or I'll take a motion, please.
A motion to approve. I didn't catch the conditions. Oh, stormwater feasibility study. As part of the
looking at
final
green and looking
plan.
at green infrastructure.
And looking at green infrastructure as part of the final development plan.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second for approval of docket item number 9 with the addition of condition to look at the stormwater with respect to green infrastructure. Lisa, can you take roll call, please, on that motion?
Commissioner Allender,
Aye.
Baker,
Aye.
Beasley, Crowe,
Aye.
Enders,
Aye.
Hill. Aye. Rojas
Aye.
and Sadowski.
Okay, looks like the motion passes 8-0. We appreciate you bringing it in and good luck as you move forward.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. All right, with that, we're on to docket item number 12.
Mr. Chair, docket item number 12 was related to stormwater policies overall and green infrastructure related to that. The docket indicates a staff person of Thomas Kimes, but he is no longer with the city. So Travis Kiefer and Brian Hess will
That's
be
correct.
here representing water today for this matter.
Good afternoon, members of the commission. Travis Kiefer with KC Water. As Joe mentioned, we have Brian Hess will be giving the presentation today. We also have Andy Shively online to answer questions. Both have been involved in the smart sewer system here.
Is this just as we move forward? Is this just a presentation for information only? Are we looking to act on something or
It's
just
for
curiosity?
information.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some time ago, maybe a year ago now, I think the commission requested some additional information about this topic.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Thank you.
This is only for information only.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds like it. Yep. It's nice to see you in person, Mr. Kiefer.
Yeah.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Brian Hess. I'm with KC Water Smart Sewer Officer and have Travis Kiefer here with me. Today, we just wanted to go over, give you an update on green infrastructure that we're using with our Smart Sewer program. And then as well, an ordinance that we've been working on here for quite some time just to give you an update on our progress to this point. We have implemented quite a bit of green infrastructure as part of our smart sewer program. This is obviously to work with our consent decree and manage the combined sewer overflows that we have within our combined sewer system of the city. We've done many of these as pilot projects and have used them as learning lessons, and we've implemented various types of green infrastructure, and currently most of these are being maintained by either the contractor that installed them or by city resources. In 2018, we did an adaptive management plan, and this resulted in some initial efforts to identify areas that would be concept areas for green infrastructure opportunities. This was adopted in 2019 by the council, and we have watershed plans in place for a number of our watersheds. And recently we have updated the Town Fork Creek and Brush Creek. Those are actually in progress now to better define the opportunities within those specific basins. As part of the third amendment to our consent decree, there was an opportunity to increase the use of green infrastructure in order to offset the costs of gray infrastructure, which is our pipes and tunnels and such. And this was in order to maximize community benefits as well to the public. So with this third consent decree amendment, we were able to put together a plan that basically meets our requirements for 480 green acres through the end of our program. With each one of these, as you can see on here, we have a project one, which is a minimum of 80 green acres that we have submitted to the EPA. And we did get approval on that plan. And then subsequently, we will have two plans that we'll put together for projects 2 and projects 3, which have an increased level of green infrastructure associated with those. Our first green infrastructure plan, we submitted and got approval from the EPA back in November of last year. We're required to have 80 green acres, and a green acre again is an acre of impervious area that drains to green infrastructure. So it's not actually the acreage of the green infrastructure footprint itself, but it's the area of impervious that drains to it. So we have identified these projects that we have listed on here. Many of these right now are in design or in construction. And we overshot our required 80 acres just so we know that we make sure that we can meet that 80 acres as we implement these projects. Currently, we have designs going on all of these. Blenheim Park is an improvement that we're completing right now, and the streetcar extension is another one that's being completed as well. As we move into the next years of this plan, or our project number 2 plan, we have already started working on elements to include in our what we call our GIP, our Green Infrastructure Project Plan number 2. And this is a project that will be included in there, and you may have heard of this. This is our 63rd Street and DMB Park project, multi-phase stormwater separation and green infrastructure project that's centered really around 63rd and Citadel at the Daniel Morgan Boone Park project. We've recently hired a design professional to begin work on that, and we look at phase 1 for anticipating completion sometime in 2024, but design work has just started underway or gotten underway. And this gives us potential of 436 green acres within the project area. So we can do a lot of good green infrastructure elements within this project, we believe. Another one that we have that's in the works right now is at 37th and Norton. This is a case of us using the adaptive management process within our consent decree in order to identify projects that we believe may be better than what was originally outlined in the consent decree. This would be a replacement for our vineyard and lawn relief sewer project. And we have done a lot of outreach with the project area or footprint there, excuse me, specifically with our Heartland Conservation Alliance partners that are focused in that area. And then we have put in a request with the EPA to have this as an alternate project. So we're waiting on that approval. We believe will come sometime later this month. So what we have done in the past as far as how we look at these areas that are potential for green infrastructure is by modeling an underground storage type facility to better understand what the capacities are in certain footprints of the area. So that process is an analysis that we've done in a basin by basin basis in order to try and pinpoint those. And as we get to projects that we want to specify in a certain basin, lots of things are considered before we move forward with a project. We also look at these through a matrix eye, so we can look at the different types of benefits and comparisons amongst the identified areas. But CSO reduction potential is one of the highest on there. I mean, we're putting dollars forward to try and reduce our combined sewer overflows, so where we can get the biggest potential benefit from that at a cost-effective manner is where we like to concentrate our efforts. Water quality, social vulnerability, aesthetic value, and then development opportunities are also what we look at in identifying our projects. Green infrastructure maintenance is also a big component, excuse me, of what we have to consider within our green infrastructure footprint. As we move forward with progress on projects after they're constructed, the construction contractor maintains those projects for 3 years. And then we have the opportunity for our in-house services with our Casey Water Green team to pick up maintenance on those, and also with our Green Stewards Workforce Development Program. And that team of contractors that we use as well, that are there to help maintain these. Once we put them in place, we have to maintain the functionality of these, maintain the appearance, and it takes a lot of effort. And if you can imagine, we have to maintain these in perpetuity. So it's a big undertaking when we identify where and how these green infrastructure elements work. Maintenance has got to be there at the top too, so we can make sure that they're meeting the requirements that we have on that CSO reduction as we move forward. So I'll give a little bit of an ordinance overview now. We're proposing to include a new article within chapter 61 that would be green infrastructure and combined sewer area. Excuse me. One of the things I'd like to point out is that we're focusing on combined sewer overflow reduction, but really what we're capturing with green infrastructure is stormwater. So how that's regulated, I guess, falls really into that stormwater component of our codes. Excuse me. Frog. So the purpose really is to reduce stormwater flows in the combined sewer system through effective use of green infrastructure as a stormwater management practice for land development and redevelopment. And this is focused really within the combined sewer areas. What we do as we work with the Smart Sewer Program and CSO reduction is we focus on the frequent storms, the 1.4 inch over 24-hour period storms. And that's what we're, for lack of a better term, graded by on our reduction with the CSOs and our smart sewer projects. What we put into projects in order to separate sewer, to capture stormwater, to keep the stormwater out of the system through our program and the millions and billions of dollars that we spend to capture that. If we do not manage what we have on the development sites or on redevelopment sites, then that is just negated work that we put into the Smart Sewer Program. So what we're proposing is for that 1.4 inch that we deal with on our CSO basis to be managed with the redevelopment and development sites within the combined sewer system as well. There are obviously existing requirements that deal with stormwater runoff on there. This is an opportunity to have that stormwater runoff dealt with in a green infrastructure environment to capture those smaller storms that we deal with. And for redevelopment sites, we do have some criteria that we will propose that that is shown here in the diagram. But I think in essence, what we want to put forward is that anything that we have disturbed, we'll look at as far as what that 1.4 inch effect has on the downstream systems. And really what we want to do is manage the release of the stormwater on site to the downstream system, because if we if combined sewer main is over capacity now and we release at a rate that's going to exacerbate that, then we can contribute to downstream overflows as well. I really wanted to just give you a brief overview of what we're working on at this point, how the green infrastructure elements of smart sewer have been implemented, and working through the ordinance efforts over the last year, probably 2 years, and where we've come to thus far. So we do have a draft ordinance. We have had a lot of turnover in our storm water group leadership and smart sewer as well. And so we've got some fresh eyes that are looking at it now, and we want to be able to make sure that we're covering all the points that we see that may be ineffective or confusing, and make sure that we have a good product to bring forward for you guys to look at. And hopefully we can do that in a rather quick time frame. But we're just now getting, I think, our heads wrapped around what we have in place as a draft at this point. So Travis, I don't know if you have anything to add, or if I can just answer any questions. Our Deputy Director, Andy Shively, is online too, so he can answer any questions if we have.
I know the commission has particular interest in the green infrastructure and tend to ask those questions on every plan that comes forward. So I know we got the experts before you today here, so.
Yeah, thank you for coming down. We certainly appreciate it. It is something that we've been looking for as a commission, just to have that presentation from you guys, and anything we could do to probably help push this along and get it approved. We'd certainly like to do that, but I know there's a few of us that have some questions, if you don't mind, that we'd like to ask. I'm gonna start
That'd be
with Mr.
great. I don't
Allen.
know if I can answer them, but we sure can find the answers as we move
Oh, sure.
forward.
No, that's no problem. I'm sure Mr. Allender has a few, so we'll go through him first.
Okay.
I do have a couple, but thank you so much for actually coming down. We've been waiting for this for a while.
Closer to your mic, please.
For a while. So thanks again. I'm interested in your 10,000 is it square foot that you've got? I know that other cities are down to 5,000. So just wanted to understand what the rationale was on arriving at a 10,000 square foot disturbed area.
Do you have any input on that, Travis?
Yeah, back and again, as Brian mentioned, this has gone over a couple of years and in development, but it was looked at that the 10,000 seemed to fit most of the infill projects, where if you got down to 5,000, then you were capturing projects that didn't have enough area to be as impactful as the 10,000 square foot or larger projects. And so that's where that number came from.
Okay. And then 430, good start. What is if you had a look at your watersheds and so forth, what would be the ultimate, if you wanted to put green infrastructure on scale? I understand it's a part of the consent decree. What would be, have you had a look at what the ultimate build out could be for Kansas City?
I don't know. I think originally there's been 1,500 to 1,800 acres or green acres, I believe, that we've looked at. I don't know that we have that much detail yet, because we've concentrated on, Brush Creek and Town Fork Creek to date. In those watersheds, the other watersheds, opportunities may be limited, but there may be some that we can look at. I think that'd probably be a better answer for us to look into a little bit more.
I think it'd be great to see what your ultimate build out is. I think there's some cities now that are building way beyond. I think 430 is pretty moderate in my mind as a target. I could cite 3 to 4 cities that are well beyond that in targeting green infrastructure build out from impervious acre. There's one that I know it's about 6,000. It's more of it's a county, but Kansas City's a big space, so or big surface area if you look at the whole city. So would encourage the water department to have a look at not only inside the CSO area. I know that's the maximum impact you can have, but also have a look at outside, because I do think even though you've got economic development at the bottom of your list, I think other cities are finding green infrastructure as a way to develop from an economic development perspective and using it in that regard. So that would be my comment. I think we should be looking beyond the 430. I know it's a consent decree, a requirement, but I think we could do better than that as
Sorry,
Kansas
Bruce,
City.
430, what?
430 impervious sake. I think it was 430.
480. As you saw in the, I think it was the Town Fork Creek slide there, we've identified potentially 430 in that, just in that basin itself.
Right.
So
Oh, okay.
there are lots of areas that are identified. It's a matter of what of those areas make sense and are cost effective. And then as well, if it's a public infrastructure type of project, how do we maintain those? Because it does take a lot of effort too.
So maintenance has been a big issue on other cities as well. What we've seen, and we're starting to see the trend across the nation, is development of green infrastructure maintenance contractors, where the city has actually helped establish that program. I know we've got a couple in Kansas City, but I think we can do better there. If I have a look at on some of the programs that I'm aware of, we've got MBE participation of well over 50%, and they're maintenance contractors that are being developed through mentorship programs and so forth. So I'd encourage the city to have a look at increasing the amount of green infrastructure and actually looking at some sort of mentorship program to encourage MBE firms to really maintain the green infrastructure in the city. It's worked very effectively for places like Prince George's County. There's a number of case studies that have been out in the industry. Milwaukee, if we go to the Midwest, is certainly a leader in my mind on looking at how they use green infrastructure, not only for CSO reduction, but across the whole of their service area. From MBE participation, they're well over 50% is the latest figures I've seen on implementation and then maintenance. But maintenance is the one that I think the city should look at. So I'd encourage the city to have a look at how we can use the MBE contractors and put those folks to work as a part of the green infrastructure program. They were the main ones, I suppose. I wouldn't like just to see the ordinance just limited to the CSO area. I'd like to be going this. We've got a lot of development up north, and I think there's a lot of detention basins that are just going in or come back to us on plans. And I'd like to see how we could actually put more green infrastructure versus us asking the question every time it comes to the commission, but some sort of policy potentially around that as well. And then having a look at private property would be the other piece I'd really, because I mean, you've only got so much public space to do, but if you actually have a look at how other cities are doing it, they're working with the private sector to put in green infrastructure onto their properties as well. So just having a look at a couple of those areas, I'd be interested when the ordinance come back on how you may have a look at that and how we put a policy around that in Kansas City. My mental statements, sorry. I didn't have many questions, but I'm pretty passionate about it. I've seen it work I've seen it work in other cities, and they're doing a lot more than what we're doing in Kansas City right now. But I understand you've got to look at the watersheds and so forth as well. But I think we could do better than 430 impervious acres across the whole city.
See, Andy has his hand raised there. Do you need to be promoted, Andy, or?
Oh, I'm good. I was just waiting for the gentleman to finish because I could add to some of the statements made. So we did look at initially 1,200 green acres as part of the third amendment, but it becomes an affordability issue. Brian, if you could go back to that benefit matrix, and at least that'll be a good talking there. So our consent decree requires us to have a CSO reduction, and then 1 and 2 are tied. What's the most cost-effective CSO reduction methodology in order to meet the requirements of the Federal Clean Water Act? So just, in other words, does one solution cost $10 per gallon for that reduction, and another one $1 per gallon for the same reduction? So there's that cost-effective component, and in the end, we still have to meet the requirements of our consent decree to have that reduction. So I had 1,200 green acres, but then it comes up an affordability issue as well. In solving that, the maintenance aspect, utilizing WBEs, that was our the Green Stewards program, and that's exactly what it was targeted towards. The private property, we've looked and actually done PPPs, the West Bottom Flats, public-private partnership. We put stormwater detention on private property. So a lot of the things that you mentioned, we have looked at and we have done. So it just boils down to meeting the requirements and doing so in a cost-effective way, so we don't have double-digit rate increases. There's been a lot of rate fatigue here in Kansas City. We also agree that green infrastructure is appropriate all over the city, in the separate system and the combined sewer system. And the Article 5 for the combined, because that's really targeting the consent decree. But we do agree with you that it is good citywide, and that brings in your APWA 5600, which is design or stormwater standards, and 2600, the construction thereof. So regionally, Mark just kicked off an effort where we're looking at 5600. How are we designing our stormwater solutions? Because Brian mentioned this, while we're spending millions of dollars to reduce combined sewer overflows, the design standard is increasing combined sewer overflows, and that's one thing that needs to change. We need a new design standard for sewers within a combined sewer area. So I think we're doing our big picture look at all this and many parallel approaches, and we look forward to coming back before you again and giving you another update when we've made progress, because we enjoy talking about green infrastructure. We enjoy installing green infrastructure, and we certainly agree with you. We'd like to see more of it put in the ground citywide.
Yeah, just on the, I agree with you, Mr. Shively, on affordability. That's been an issue with some other cities. The way that they've looked at it is they've actually put a program on scale. And if you have a look at Prince George's County, I think the initial figures were $150,000 an acre foot, or impervious acre, sorry. I think it's been implemented over there now at around about 50 to 75,000 in dollars per impervious acre. So if you can build it out in scale, I think that helps from an affordability perspective. But I won't tell the city how to look at how to implement their program, but that's been one way that other cities have really looked at that affordability of putting green infrastructure in the ground as well. So I just to hit that, because it's always been a big barrier. If you do it on one project at a time, yeah, it's costly, but if you can do it in a bigger program, and implementation, from an implementation perspective, then other cities have got to a more affordable cost.
There's going to be a question, just kind of follow up through that. If there's an opportunity for regional type of detention versus just on-site localized type of detention. I mean, like you're doing with Daniel Boone Park, is there an opportunity to buy a credit, so to speak, to make it just a little bit bigger or something like that to replace development within that watershed? Maybe they don't have to do detention on their site, or the 1.5 or 1.4, inch that maybe they can just buy credit, or so to speak, in that area. It's just a curiosity if that's something. I'm sure you've thought about that. And I know it's pretty difficult to implement, but it's.
And there has been programs, Washington DC's got a program of a credit program, but
Yeah, it might be
it
similar
is-
to like the park impact fee or something like that, where you're,
Stormwater.
you could set it up similar to that. I don't know.
but I know Mark is looking at it.
That would be a timing issue compared, when is the development going to move forward compared to when are we doing the construction in Daniel Morgan Park? Because of that time and the cost per green acre, we've looked at that. And then that's number two, cost effective CSO reduction. What's the cost per green acre, cost per gallon reduced? And then is buying a credit into that storage. Well, at what time? Once it's built out, we've assumed that 1.4 inch of rainfall for that area, drainage area. And so then it would take into account that. So buying in, it's not a bad idea, Chair. I think it's a timing issue.
Yeah. Implementation is always the hardest part of that.
Yes, sir.
I totally get it.
But there are programs that are working in the United States in that we should have a look at.
Quick level setting question for me. If you were to put all stormwater into a pie chart, how much of it is in control of the city? How much of it is from residential, from business, and then a separate pie chart? How much of it is in control within our boundaries, and how much are you subject to just who's, on the other side of the city line?
I don't know that we've ever put it into a pie chart, but I think we would be able to calculate how much impervious area that the city owns through public right of way and public premises, if you will, versus private. I would say it's going to lean way heavy towards the private side, out of our control. You've got MoDOT. They're their impervious area. We don't have any control over MoDOT's right of way, and I-670's runoff gets dumped right onto Walnut there if you're on the south side of the loop, and so I would say weighted heavier on the private side. You've made me venture to guess, without putting the numbers together, 80% out of our control, maybe 90, probably 90. That's just happening, I guess. So
a lot.
Railroad would be another one. There's a lot of railroads in the area.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You could buy credits.
Yep.
Makes it tough.
Other questions?
I had a few questions. Yeah, I was curious, just to echo Tyler's point around, just better understanding what's in our control and what's not in our control. I think that might be a good part of your report as you enter into proposing the ordinance, is just to give us a sense of why behind we needing private development to step up, because there is only so much we can do and penetrate with public lands. And then I think also maybe a part of that would be helpful is a macro understanding from a regional perspective. I know Mid-America Regional Council has done a lot of plans across the region, maybe just how that fits in with the plan specific to KCMO. I was curious, is the ordinance proposed just for new development? And is it, I think Bruce mentioned he'd like to see it across the city versus just in the CSO area. Could you clarify what you're thinking?
Redevelopment and new development.
Yeah, it was focused on redevelopment and development within the CSO boundaries.
So
Just
I might
within the
second. Sorry, go ahead.
no, you're correct. It's just within the combined sewer area, which is like 58 square miles.
Okay. I might second the idea that spread across the city. And the reason is that in the CSO area, I imagine if you saw that pie chart, a lot of the development has already occurred. So we're looking at a very small percentage of these new developments that would be able to impact that. So if we could, particularly in the Northland, I think that's where it's going to make the biggest difference. And to your point about cost effectiveness, being able to do it early on is going to make a big difference. I would maybe like to tweak your language a little bit on
your benefit matrix, like the cost effective CSO reduction. I feel like that's maybe two parts, which is the CSO reduction, but also just storm resiliency, cost effective storm resiliency, because that starts to speak to why we need to do it in the new development areas, regardless of whether they're in the CSO as well. And then I did have a question about, are you seeing any federal funding sources like through the infrastructure bill around green infrastructure? And is there opportunity to partner with other cities to go after some of that money?
There has not been any identified with the ARPA funding as it relates directly to green infrastructure, but there are other elements that we're continue to look into as far as what can help fund some of that. Andy, I don't know if you have any other to add on that.
No, we did go after some of the ARPA funds, but there was a lot of competition for those dollars, and so we were always looking for opportunities to get outside funding sources to help the rate fatigue on our citizens and our ratepayers. So we're sympathetic with that too, and SRF funding we've utilized, just whatever is available out there. We're willing to go after or take a look at. Does it make financial sense to use those dollars to reduce the burden on our citizens?
So you've got SRF, and I'd also look at WIFIA. WIFIA are funding stormwater programs right now. It's a low interest loan. There's some deferred payment around the WIFIA loan program as well. But I agree with you. There are minimum grants that you can get. There's small bites, but the big programs have been really looking at SRF and WIFIA to fund them over a longer term.
I think we used WIFIA out of our biosolids project at the Blue River wastewater treatment plant. So we're all on the same page when it comes to looking for funding opportunities for our citizens. We agree with you 1,000%.
The other thing you could look into is analyzing your projects through carbon reduction, because you might be able to access like the $27 billion of GHG reduction fund or other things that are coming in the IRA. If you can kind of draw a correlation between the carbon sink of those locations relative to, also the stormwater resiliency.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, believe me, Memphis is looking at that right now and seeing how they can tie it to carbon reduction, carbon footprint reduction.
Any other questions, Commission, for now?
I actually did have one other question. Have you explored how we could affect existing sites, sites that are already developed but need, maybe they have some green space that could work for this, but is there any sort of, I'm going back to Bruce's concept around, in DC, like whether it's credits or something that would incentivize them to do something on their existing properties?
Talking about existing developed properties?
Yeah, existing developed properties, because like we said, CSO, that's going to be a lot of already developed properties. So if we could affect those sites as well.
Through our basin studies on the effective areas, we do look at large parking areas that can be redeveloped into green parking, impervious type pavers or that sort of thing. So we have identified specific sites that may work, but that would be through our public funded CSO reduction program. So the idea that Mr. Crowell brought up in regards to credits or funding sharing, I guess, as far as on those specific areas, we haven't dove into anything along those lines yet. But as this is implemented, if it were to be implemented in those CSO areas, as a property did redevelop, there would be a need to find appropriate areas to implement those green infrastructure pieces. So however that works on site or partnering at a location that, is it advantageous to others to buy into? That would require some further investigation from us.
I think if I could jump in to answer, I think there are some things we can do in chapter 88, the zoning code, that may incentivize that in certain areas. And we haven't gotten far enough along yet to know what does redevelopment really mean in this context. It may not necessarily mean complete bulldozing of an existing site and rebuilding something. There's a lot of increment there between doing nothing with the property and a complete bulldozing and rebuilding. And if there's things we can do in chapter 88 that need to be amended to make it more feasible to do it on those targeted properties and locations, then that could certainly serve as an incentive potentially.
Yeah, I mean, you have a look at other cities. I mean, they've really attacked some land bank and looking at their blighted properties, putting them into green spaces from a neighborhood revitalization perspective as well. So there's been investment into those blighted properties where it makes sense to put some green infrastructure on them for community spaces, which revitalizes the community, which then comes back to your 6-point development opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. We take all of that into consideration. And so the chapter 88, I agree that there are things that can be done there that would help, and that creates a broader conversation within the development community, because anytime you touch chapter 88, then it brings more stakeholders to the table and loop them in.
I mean, I feel like I see with a lot of our projects this sense of a lot of the burden being put on new development in terms of meeting the EPA consent decree. And so just, kind of many hands make light work. If we can get that to be a broader definition of redevelopment so that there's more sites affected, so that the smaller sites aren't having to maybe feel as much of the burden.
And I also think, where the developers potentially getting their money from, some of it now is more ESG driven. Correct, from where it was 3 to 4 years ago. So they're putting green infrastructure will only help them attract some investment too, I believe.
Please speak in the microphone.
So if I might, on a couple of your slides, one of them, you listed some projects, and the one that caught my attention was the Paseo Gateway.
Yes.
And my mind went to, how is that going to impact the new stadium that's close to that area? Are these just areas that you're looking at, or things that you're actually working on? So that's the clarification I think I need on that.
Yeah, the Paseo Gateway / KCU, that's Kansas City University. There is a project ongoing right now with the parks and MoDOT to realign the intersection there. And as part of that, there is an area adjacent to KCU that is being graded out right now, actually, to incorporate some stormwater capture retention that we're developing with them in order to build it into a green infrastructure project now. So it's already in progress and under construction actually at this point. So it's not near the stadium, but up on the hill next to KCU.
That's correct. And the planning in that took place 2018, 2019, and as Brian mentioned, under construction now. So we were pretty pleased with that partnership as well. And I know it's been brought up several times, that any opportunity that we have to partner on the private side and put in infrastructure to control stormwater and stormwater resiliency, we do. And this Kansas City University is another example of that.
In the other slide, you had the picture of tunnels that had yellow on them. Those are just examples, or have you already, that one? Are you putting that in somewhere, or is this?
These are just examples. These would be how we are able to calculate what some of the storage volumes are required. And also these are used in some applications under impervious parking areas, where we use pavers and such. So that's a green infrastructure type of application.
And then the one that I thought of that's not in any of your slides, there was a real push at one time for rain gardens to be installed around public sidewalks. One that comes to mind is Linwood and Truce. So does that tie into part of your, and right now which slide it was one of the slides where you were showing different plantings that would help with the water retention and runoff? So is that, so is that one of the examples, these rain gardens that we were doing, would that fall up under the new type of maintenance that you would need to implement for some of these other ideas you're talking about?
I think, is it in one of these here, maybe?
Yes, those are, that first one with the,
Yeah, with the bollard.
The Middle Blue River Pilot Project area. What we learned is the smaller rain gardens, we don't get the level of CSO reduction because you'll have 130 of, let's say 130 rain gardens compared to one basin at like at 81st and Truce, like it's the compare and contrast. So 130 different green infrastructure installations to one. And so in that pilot project area, we learned a lot. And so certainly rain gardens are appropriate, but not for large scale CSO reduction. Does that answer your question?
it does. I just wanted it tied into the system.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes to make sure that we're done before 1 o'clock. Any other questions the commission has at this time? Appreciate the discussion and bringing us in and talking through this. I just had two things. Where are we now with the ordinance and what's the goal for updating chapter 61? What kind of time frame are you on?
Well, I think, what would be beneficial for us is to probably get our arms wrapped around some of these questions and points that you brought up. Look at what we have drafted thus far and see what kind of, obviously there's got to be some sort of connection between some of the other chapters as well, if it's necessary. I don't know, Andy, I think sometime probably in early to mid next year.
Middle 23 or something
Yeah,
of that nature is
the
kind of
end of
push.
the fiscal year probably is close to what we anticipate.
Yeah. If we go and add an Article 6, which would be the green infrastructure in the separate sewer system, based on comments today, which we are in agreement with, that's going to bring additional stakeholders to the table and the development community. And so that'll drive that timeline, Chair. So, it depends on how many more changes we make to that ordinance. Adding a chapter 6 for this green infrastructure in the separate sewer system will add significant time. I would say a year. Time you have your stakeholder input and public input, and it's,
Sure.
it's not a fast process. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was kind of curious on that and I misspoke and said chapter 6. It's actually 61, adding this number 5. So I apologize about that.
That's all right.
How can we help? What can we do to help you guys with this process and help get it approved within that year or so?
I think really what you're doing now, you bring it up every hearing, which so the development community knows it's a priority for the city, and sometimes they feel like it's only a priority for KC Water. Well, that's not true. It's a priority for the whole city. So you're just bringing it up time and time again, so they hear it over and over again. Makes our conversation easier when we bring them to the table and we can say, everybody in the city is interested in it. And so what can we do to find a solution together? And that's really what it's about. So we appreciate the work that CPC does and hammering on it. And I know you grow weary of hammering on it. And if we codify it, then it makes your discussion a little easier. So we'll move forward as expeditiously as possible and happy to come back and give you updates as often as you want.
Okay, we really appreciate it. And we don't want to wear Travis out. That's the key, I think.
The one other thing I'd say is that I'm sort of 1 degree away from this, but there is a lot of conversations like this happening in other cities. So if there's a way that this ordinance could be adopted in other cities at the same time, particularly in the same watersheds, I think that would be really great. And I think Mark would be more than happy to help facilitate that. So happy to talk offline on that, but that's been a lot of the conversations I've overheard is the regional effort towards green infrastructure ordinances, maintenance, all the things we're talking about, education. So
That's what we're looking at right now with the APWA 5600. And I think we had 20 plus communities in this region that are participating in that. We're just we just kicked that process off, and we figure it's going to be about a 2-year process. So
yeah,
regionally, because that's a lot. There's a lot of stakeholders at the table.
Sure.
Well, thank you for all your work you're doing. We certainly appreciate it. And thank you for coming in and giving us an update. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else to bring before the commission? There's a slight chance I might be out the 2nd November meeting. Slight chance. Like 60% chance. Is that slight enough?
That's a significant chance.
Okay, so I make a motion to adjourn the meeting. All right, thank you, everybody.
There's